Just got it. Okay, welcome. It is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, the meeting of the City of South Burlington Development Review Board. I'm Vice Chair Dan Albrecht, serving as chair for this meeting, as our chair is absent. We'll go through a few things. First thing, if you're here in person in the room, please sign the interested person sheet in the back of the room. Be sure to note which application you're interested, want to testify in or representing, etc. For folks online, please type in the chat what your name and what application you're interested in. This is important to good ringtone. Oh, that's a good ringtone, though. So it's important that the sign in there so that we can establish interested persons your status for certain projects and also for the accuracy of the minutes and all. On the again with the chat, it is not there for side conversations, and it's not there for ad hoc testimony, things like that. So if you want to testify, we'll get to that after the board applicants' presentations and board discussion. We'll invite public comment on the applications. As far as emergency evacuation procedures for here in the room, we got 2 exits in the back, and you can go out the back there and to either side of the building, the north side and the south side.
This conference will now be recorded.
And then, excuse me? Okay. First, our agenda tonight is the any comments and questions from public not related to the agenda. Announcements. We have 2 applications which will be continued. First one to November 2nd, the Larkin Realty one, MS-21-04 for stream alteration and stormwater drainage, 1195 Shelburne Road. That will be continued to November 2nd. So don't feel the need to stay or on the line or in person if you want regard that one. The next one, SD-21-21 of Donald and Lewis Curran to amend a previously approved PUD of 2 lots. That's continued to October 19th, so same thing there. We have people that need to recuse themselves and things like that, so would like to see about moving the approval of the minutes of September 8th up to item number 4 to take that care of after any comments and questions. Is that okay with the board members? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that's the change in the agenda there. Any other announcements from staff? Okay. Any comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? All right. Thank you. I'll go to the minutes of September 8th. Have board members had a chance to review them? Yeah. Okay. Any corrections?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, a little scratchy. Go ahead.
Okay. Just I was not in attendance.
Oh, okay.
I'm listed as being an attendee.
All right.
Is Jim on the phone? Do we have Jim?
I am, yes.
Jim Langen is there. Great. Okay.
I'm
good.
gonna. Delilah, do you want to? Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so there's the minutes for September 8th with the correction to remove Mr. Bear from the members present. Can you hear a motion on the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Stephanie.
I think that was Jim.
Oh, Jim. Okay.
That was Jim.
All right, motion's been made and second to approve the minutes of September 8th as corrected. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
And any abstentions? All right, great. All right, so on to the business at hand. Like the applicants for site plan application SP-21-039 of South Village Communities LLC.
Hang on. We have to actually take a motion and accept the motion to, continue items number 4 and 5.
Okay, sure. Thank you. All right. Okay, could we hear a motion to continue items 4 and 5, MS-2104 and SD-21-21?
So moved.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. Motion's been made and second to continue items, applications MS-21-04 and SD-21-21 to dates November 2nd for the MS-2104 of Larkin Realty and October 19th for Donald and Lewis Kerwin. Motion's been made and second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Yeah, I
Sure.
was gonna point out that I'm recused from item number 4, so I'm abstaining from that one.
Okay. Abstention vote from there for number 4, Larkin Realty. All right, motion's been made and second and approved. Chair votes aye on the motion, and the motion passes. Okay, back to agenda item 6, site plan application SP-21-039 of South Village Communities LLC to provide a replacement plan for trees and shrubs that were improperly removed. The plan consists of installing a heavily landscaped passive recreation area and walking path between Aiken and Spear Street, east of the existing paved recreation path at 1840 Spear Street. Who's here for the applicant?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Hello, Dave. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Do you have the magic language for swearing in?
I can open it. It's in the DRB Rules of Procedure.
Thank you.
Do you have that?
I didn't print out all of that. I
Okay.
got most of
I
the
would be
most
happy-
of the cheat sheets.
I would be happy to open it for you.
Thank you.
DRB
Thanks for your
Rules of
patience.
Procedure.
I haven't got this part memorized yet. All right. Mr. Marshall, do you hereby swear that the evidence you give in the case under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so, or help me God, or under the pains and penalties of perjuries?
I do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Keep that open for later.
Go ahead, and do we have the, you bring up the staff comments? So if you want to just summarize the issue here, Dave, and then we'll address the staff comments.
So, in this particular case, there is a plan that identifies the proposed improvements, but nonetheless, there was an existing, not even a hedgerow, but a grouping of trees that separated the now under construction multifamily buildings associated with South Village, primarily lots 4A and 4B. And that particular area that separated those particular buildings from the street, it was overcut. It was unauthorized removal of trees. And this application seeks to correct that with replacement plantings in a manner that actually creates a little bit more organization of what otherwise had been that mass of trees, and also introduces a walking path, a wood chip walking path through that particular area as part of the augmentation and enjoyment of that new planting plan. I can't make it more complicated than that.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we'll walk through the staff comments here on the application. The first issue addresses dimensional requirements. And this, you bring the staff comment up there. So staff comment number 1, MP 2101 approved an overall coverage for the PUD of 20%. I won't read it in detail there. Since coverage increasing, this is clearly so we'll start from the beginning here. So the maximum overall coverage on a lot-by-lot basis is 30%. Overall coverage numbers on the application form indicate existing coverage of 5%, but 0% for proposed coverage. Since coverage is increasing, this is clearly incorrect, though staff is unconcerned about the parcel exceeding the allowable limit for lot coverage. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide corrected lot coverage in acreage and percentages.
So based on what Dave just said, this comment may not be relevant. Sounds like it's a wood chip path, which I didn't understand. Is that correct, Dave? So
That
there's
is
no,
correct.
there's no increase in coverage?
There's no new impervious area associated with the replanting plan and the wood chips. There is that walking path that I mentioned. That is a wood chip path intended to try to retain the impervious nature of the area.
So given that information, I would just recommend a condition of approval that requires the numbers get cleaned up.
If I may offer that now, we did confirm the 5% value as far as the existing lot coverage, and that's the existing recreation path that
Yep.
runs through that open space lot. And since there's no new increase, we're very comfortable reporting that the number will remain at 5%.
Sounds okay, board members? Okay, staff comment number 2 deals with Southeast Quadrant standards. A plan for the proposed, so the standard reads, a plan for the proposed open spaces and or natural areas and their ongoing management shall be established by the applicant. South Village, so the staff comment is, South Village has an open space management plan which the applicant has indicated pertains to maintenance of the large natural areas, large natural open spaces east of phases 1 and 2 and west of phase 3. Since this is the first active and managed open space proposed within the development, staff recommends the board require the applicant to establish a written plan for management of this and similar future open space, including assigning responsibility for maintenance prior to closing the hearing. Staff recommends that such plan be incorporated into this approval. Thoughts, Dave?
That is correct. I think that's a good summary in regards to the original open space management plan that was created back in 2004 for the project. And again, at that particular time, the intent was to basically work and maintain those particular natural areas as part of the ongoing management and improvement, elimination of invasive species and the like from those particular areas to try to improve upon them. But at the time that particular document was created, there wasn't an envisioned area where we would be replanting existing natural trees. So what we would like to do is probably use some of the portions of that current document to create a framework for a management plan that would deal with this more man-made area going forward. So in this particular case, there's 2 options. One is that we can wait. We can continue the hearing and have that presented to the board, or the fact that there's already a management plan in place, we'd be comfortable with a condition that we work with staff to the point where we would get their ultimate approval with regard to the components of that particular management plan, and have that management plan be obviously the means for managing that particular area, both now as well as in the future.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Marla, is that something staff feels comfortable doing? Responsibility? Without our consultation?
It's a little vaguer than we typically allow. The board can approve conditions so long as the conditions are specific, and draft an open space management plan seems a little unspecific. So in my mind, the open space management plan for this active recreation area would include things like how often it gets mowed, who the responsible parties are, the fact that the vegetation. Yeah. If we could write a condition that says it shall include X, Y, and Z things, then I think it's okay. But if it's really open-ended, I think it's not going to work.
And we're happy coming back, with that particular plan in place so that the full board can review that, or the staff can present that to the full board. So we're comfortable either way, however you would like to manage the situation.
I'd rather not see you again, no offense. I'd rather not see this project again, no offense. I'd like to see it keep moving. I'd love to come up with a solution that we can all work with so that this tree replacement can take place.
Yeah. Board members,
I agree with Marla's suggestion.
any other board members' thoughts on this? Can we park this for the rest of our discussion and just kind of get through see how we do on the rest of the staff
idea.
comments and circle back on it here? All right, thanks. Item number 3. Bottom, so, again, continuing on the question of construction entrance, construction access. The applicant, provided a narrative regarding construction access. It's there on the bottom, page 4, on the top of page, I don't know what page number it is, but continuing on, basically, staff recommendation is to, the board include a condition requiring the applicant to modify the plans to show construction access as described.
We're acceptable to that.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Board members, how's that sound? Okay, all right, moving right along to site plan review standards 14.06. B, relationship of proposed structures to the site. So the standard is the site shall be planned to accomplish a desirable transition from structure to site, from structure to structure, and to provide for adequate planting, safe pedestrian movement, and adequate parking areas. Staff considers that the trees were removed, that the trees that were removed provided a transition between the SEQ and R on the east side of Spear Street and the R1 zoning district on the west side of Spear Street. The proposed planting consists primarily of medium trees interspersed with shrubs, include a mixture of evergreen deciduous species. The pre-existing plants that remain in the wood consist of tall, thin trees. 4, staff recommendations. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe how the proposed plan provides equal compliance with this criteria when compared to the improperly removed trees, and then the board determine whether this criterion is met. Dave?
It's a fair question for a civil engineer, but I'll do my best. Delilah, would it be possible to get the landscaping plan up on screen? There we go. So what you're seeing in front of you, the plan doesn't go quite far enough to the left to actually show the street, but nonetheless, immediately on the left is the existing recreation path, and then in the kind of grayed out area that's clouded, that's approximately the limits of the existing vegetation that was not impacted by the overcutting. And then the colored portions to the east of that, that would be to the right on this particular plan, is the proposed infill. And in this particular case, it offers a mixture of vegetation types, whether they be trees or shrubs, and in this particular case will create probably a healthier environment than what was there before. I'm only guessing because when I went out to take a look at the site, a lot of the existing trees are overgrown by vines and things that really do create some challenges for the health of trees. So in this particular case, perhaps with the management plan, we would be able to create a very healthy area for these particular new plantings to survive and to thrive. So with that, I think I was not involved in the preparation of this particular plan, but when I saw it for the first time, it's like, wow, that's going to be better than what it was before. So keep in mind that some of the goals may be associated with screening. Not that what's out there today is the best, and Marla's staff report does talk about some of the varied nature. The applicant did send in a picture today, but we won't take the time to deal with that. But I think the important thing is to make sure that what is being placed in there is viable, that it has variety and will create interest, which the old pod of trees really didn't have a lot of interest. So I think there's opportunities to actually create something better. It will take time, obviously, for the full height component to take effect, but nonetheless, in regards to planting the seeds, quote unquote, of something that will be very interesting and I would like to think very diverse. This particular plan proposes that.
What's the diameter of the trees you're gonna plant?
I'm sorry, Frank.
What's the starting diameter of the trees you're
Oh.
gonna plant?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Now you're gonna see if my eyes work today.
There it is.
So, thank you. I can see that better. Nonetheless, it has, depending on the type of tree, it's generally ranging about 2 inches. There's a couple of 2.5 inch. There's 1 inch and a half as far as the crabapple. Otherwise, the shrubs are starting out at approximately 30 inches to 36 inches in height.
And the trees you took down were mature trees with trunks?
They were framed, yes. I didn't take them down, but nonetheless, they should not have been taken down.
Well, I mean, is there some reason we can't ask for more substantial initial plantings? I mean, you could put in 5-inch caliber trees if they're available. They don't. I mean, these are just sticks in the ground, 2.5-inch caliber.
So what
Well-
our city arborist always says when someone proposes a larger tree is, you know, it's sort of a admirable aspiration, but it does require a lot more TLC to make a larger transplant successful than a smaller transplant. So that's just something that has to be kept in mind when thinking about requiring larger trees.
Well, how long does it take these trees to get to anywhere near the size where they're gonna fulfill the function that they're being asked to fulfill?
I think you would be doing well to get a foot a year.
And so, keeping in mind, if we could go back to the previous sheet, some of the trees still remain, and those trees, I don't know if you had an opportunity to go out. I did ask the board if they had the opportunity to go out and do a little drive-by of this site, so most of them are familiar with what it looks like. So some of the trees remain, and they tend to be sort of not a lot of understory. And so what they're proposing here is more understory, so it may have the effect, sorry, I just put that in there. Go to the JPEG, Delilah. Yeah, that's my mistake, sorry about that. So that's what's there today
Yes.
from the South Village side. From Spear Street, if you have the opportunity to drive past it, it just looks like a bunch of tall, skinny trees to me, but that's, you know, driving by at the speed limit at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so it may be that the understory trees will actually fill out this area a little bit more than retaining a bunch of really large trees.
Well, I don't know, there's old Wilking when you need him. So. Who's the visualizer here? Anybody else on the board have comment on the adequacy of these skinny trees?
The, just to be clear, if you can pull back up the plan, there isn't, vegetation screening the entire, in the entire north-south stretch between the road and that's just one little segment, and there's nothing to the south or north of that in terms of landscaping, is there?
No.
That is correct.
And there was nothing in the original master plan approval about eventually vegetating this whole strip?
No, that is correct. So when you drive up and down the street and you look in, the single-family homes all have only what they chose to put on their own lot. Otherwise, there is no screening of the open space lot between the street and those single-family home lots.
Okay. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Frank, but it's, I mean, and were that, in my mind, where there were extensive landscaping to the north and south of this, and this was leaving a gaping hole because of some contractor's mistake, I could see rectifying it immediately, but in this case, it's sort of a funny little vestige, at least as far as I can tell.
It was specifically mentioned in the approval for this phase, like not this board's approval, but the approval back in whenever phase 1 was approved. This wood was mentioned as specifically providing a transition, and that's why I mentioned it in the staff comments.
Right.
Okay. Other board members have comments on this issue?
Ben, can I comment?
You speak up, Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to just offer just a comment. I think one thing that I agree with most of the comments that have been said, both by Dave and the other board members, and Marla and staff. But the heavily wooded area was really meant to be a buffer / transition because of the multi-story, multifamily housing that went in. I know that the majority of the stuff that was in there was a lot of sort of, I don't want to call them junk trees and junk shrubs because sometimes, it's still vegetation. But I do think that with time, this landscape planting plan will fill in nicely. And that, along with the wood chip path, I think it's a nice amenity that without the mistake that occurred would not have happened. You would have ended up with the existing shrub tree area that over time would have gotten just kind of more of, I want to say that this I feel is an amenity. So I think it does offer a nice transition.
Okay. All right.
So I would recommend kind of carrying on through the staff comments and then deciding if the board, generally feels the board doesn't have to make their decision in public, but you do have to get enough information to make your decision before closing the meeting. So, if you want to think about this as we discuss it and then kind of at the end decide if you have enough to make a decision, that'd be fine.
Sounds good to me. Board members, okay? All right, let's keep moving on here. Staff comment number 5 under landscaping. Modifications under landscaping and screening requirements, section 5. Modifications where the existing topography in our landscape provides adequate screening or would render the normally required screening inadequate. The DRB may modify the planting and our buffer requirements by respectively decreasing or increasing the requirements. Staff considers the relevant elevation of the site, which is 15 to 16 feet higher than Spear Street, to be a relevant factor in the effectiveness of the screening. The comment is, staff recommends the board determine, given the provided plans and testimony, as well as any additional testimony the applicant wishes to provide, whether the board finds the criteria of 13.06C and by extension 14.07F. Is that F?
I guess it should have been D, right?
D. Yeah. D to be met.
So this is a comment on, sorry, this is like me getting fancy with tabs and spacing, so you're supposed to be able to tell that by this comment I'm referring to all of the words on the page above it, which is, in retrospect, not super well done.
Okay.
So does it provide screening? Does the landscaping minimize erosion and stormwater runoff? Is it adequate given the topography? Those are sort of the things that this question is asking.
Yep. And the general standard there in 13.06C of, why these, do we feel that the intent of this section is being met, this criterion is being met? Jim Langen, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the plan from what I've read and heard so far.
Okay, Mark?
Not yet. I'm okay so far as we continue discussions.
Stephanie? Okay, Frank?
No, I haven't absorbed it yet.
All right. Give it a minute there to absorb it. Is there any other additional comments you want from staff or the applicant that can aid us in making a decision?
Some responsibility to not have absorbed it and acquiesce in the board's sense of matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving to the last page of the staff comments. The applicant has requested 2 modifications of the provision of 13.06I, that all plantings shown on approved site plan shall be maintained in a vigorous growing condition throughout the duration of the use. First, they have requested the board include a condition allows the applicant to remove any remaining invasive tree or shrub species as well as any dead, dying, or diseased trees within the remaining stands of shrubs and trees as approved by the city arborist. Staff comments. Staff considers the board may wish to allow applicant to remove invasive dead, dying, or diseased trees within the remaining wooded area, but such removal should not occur without the applicant providing the written approval of the city arborist to the zoning administrative officer. Sound,
They built that into their request, right?
yep,
So,
sounds reasonable to me. Board members?
It sounds reasonable, Dan, but I just have one comment about that, and that's that, we're basing some of our discussions and review on what's been left, and then saying that this additional planting will sort of provide sort of nice undershrub or shrub plantings. My concern is that when they go through and clear out any more additional dead or invasive species, that the appearance of what we're approving will be changed and different from what our perception is tonight.
but isn't that a call that the arborist, I've been kind of counting on the arborist to take that into account, or is that asking too much of the arborist?
Well, what I'm hearing Mark say is that if everything was invasive species as far as what we were seeing from the street, and we go and take all of that out, it's really going to look naked. So the question ultimately
Correct.
is do we have a certain period of time in which the new plantings have a chance to get established, start to fill in before we start to strip out those particular invasive species? And there may be some ways to achieve both goals. When we're dealing with vines as opposed to the main body of the trees or shrubs that are out there today, what can we do actually to improve their health? So I think it's one which perhaps a condition that indicates that we're not looking for wholesale changes in regards to the view shed from the street into the project area, but at the same time, if work can be done in a manner that maintains the character, then that may be the middle ground to achieve both address Mark's concern as well as ultimately to achieve the intent of eliminating the invasive species that occupy the space today.
So what would the role, maybe someone can help me here, what would be the role of the city arborist? I mean, I was assuming that they would work out a plan that respected.
And Frank, I think
The arborist would be sensitive to that, but maybe that's asking too much of him. He's just gonna say whether it's an invasive species, it should be removed, that doesn't care whether it strips the whole,
Yeah.
that's the role of the arborist?
Yeah, the city arborist is not part of the
alright.
not planning and zoning department, right?
so. I think there's definitely needs. Go ahead.
City arborist confirming the PP terms of invasive and the zoning administrator overlooking that the intent of the space is still there.
Well, in that case, maybe we should add a condition. That
Yes.
says approval of the city arborist and the development coordinator. How about that?
And if I may offer that, I think that's exactly where staff is kind of going, in the fact that we have two layers of review, one with the arborist, city arborist, and another with the zoning administrator. But the important thing is that the board identify what the intent is. So within the condition, identify that the intent is not to strip away the undergrowth of this particular area as part of the maintenance of the removal of invasive species until the other plantings have had the chance to infill.
And would you be supplying supplemental plantings if it did remove a significant portion of invasives and undergrowth?
I think that's really a very site-specific opportunity. But I think anything that we do different than what the board approves requires that we come back, or, well, I'll leave it at that. I think unfortunately, I just don't know enough about those particular burdened areas to understand how much opening could occur without the checks and balances. I think it is important to have those checks and balances in place because I don't think any of us want to go and be looking through the understory, which is fairly healthy with secondary types of growth. So I've talked my way all around it, but I think at this point in time, a condition that requires that the intent of the screening be retained with minimal removal of invasive species until the new plantings have taken shape is ultimately the direction that serves the purposes the best.
And then I guess could we condition the maintenance plan that they make sure that the invasives don't extend beyond where they are now to encroach upon the new plantings
Right.
and cause the same issue over there?
That's something we could certainly, during our findings, we could certainly address that kind of language. All right. All right, moving on to the last item here. Staff notes the requested condition that would allow the landowner to replace trees on the landscaping plan as approved by the city arborist based upon supply chain limitations. Take a moment there to read item 7. I won't read it all out. Staff recommends if the board does wish to grant this flexibility, it should require replacement with plantings of the same size, shape, and nature, parentheses, deciduous and evergreen, and require such plantings to be approved by the zoning administrator prior to planting. Do we want to say approved by the city arborist and the zoning administrator? And it's kind of a given, but,
Yeah, that's why I didn't write it, because it's kind of a given.
okay. How does that sound, Dave? So, okay. That kind of condition sound reasonable, Dave?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks. Board members, any final comments on that?
I'd like to hear.
No, I'm fine with it.
Condition would say that let's see, I don't have the exact language here. It would say the applicant may replace trees on the landscaping plan as approved by the city arborist. But it would also, based upon supply chain limitations, but it would require replacement with plantings of the same size, shape, and nature, deciduous and evergreen, and require such plantings to be approved by the zoning administrator prior to planting. Some kind of language like that. All right. So circling back to staff comment 4, we've gone full circle. Do we feel the criterions been met regarding the overall criterion of the site shall be planned to accomplish a desirable transition from structure to site, from structure to structure, to provide for adequate planting, safe pedestrian movement, and adequate parking areas. So that in this case, do we feel that planting is adequate to be able to resolve staff comment number 4? Given our discussion tonight. Any further questions we need or information from the applicant to make a decision?
Yeah, I don't think 2.5 inch.
I'm okay with the information we have.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what the next?
Mark said he thinks we have enough information at this point. We still have to see if there's any public comment, but.
No vote won't kill you, you said that.
Okay.
I know that those,
All right.
the 2.5 inch caliber trees, but it'll be a long time before they provide any screening to speak of. But I don't feel comfortable with that. It's no screening at all for a long time.
Well, you'll still have your opportunity to convince other members of the board during deliberations.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Hold on there. Let's see, any members of the public?
We were gonna circle back on number 2 as well.
As well?
You wanna
Oh,
do
yeah.
that after public comment? That's fine.
Sure, yeah, we've all talked a lot. Dave's talked a lot. Let's give Dave a break. Any members of the public here in the room wish to testify? Okay, and any members online? Do we have anybody online
We
here?
do.
Okay.
Looks like Stuart has his hand up.
Stuart, you have your hand up.
I do. Can
and-
you hear me all right?
All right, do I need to swear him in too?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Stuart.
Hi. Okay. I have a couple of questions, really focusing on the maintenance. I mean, in general, I like the plan. The trees look very nice, and I'm glad that the replacements are going in. But my concern as a resident and indeed the president of the HOA is what's the long-term maintenance requirement to keep the plants healthy? because, you know, the developer will be going away and it'll be up to the HOA and the stewardship committee to take care of these. So maybe there are extensive costs for an area that really it was free of maintenance costs before. So I'm interested to know about the long-term maintenance costs and whether it was discussed with the stewardship committee at all. Dave?
Dave? Thank you,
I'm
Stuart.
sorry, Stuart, I don't know with regard to any of the communications that went on with the stewardship committee. So I'm totally flat-footed. I apologize for not knowing that answer. Relative to maintenance, I think of, you know, what typical, I don't want to say street trees, but around a project that requires site plan approval. You know, they often have very aggressive landscaping plans, and there is maintenance that goes along with it. But I'm not sure if it's exorbitant, but I think that really comes down to ultimately to the plan that is put together. That is just that it was identified as being an obligation of the applicant is to identify exactly how this area is to be managed. And I think once that particular program has been put together, we'll all better understand what those cost obligations will be going forward. So I didn't answer your question because I don't know the answer.
Right. Yeah. I would say it's disappointing that, you know, the developer hasn't been in touch before just dropping the plan on us. Again, I would say the plan looks very nice, but I would have liked some previous communication. My other question, Dave, and you hopefully you know the answer to this, will the whole area be mulched, or will the area just allow the dead leaves and stuff to grow underneath the trees as it currently does?
That's a very good question. Again, I'm not sure if I can answer that off the top of my head. I would love to see it fully mulched because that would eliminate much of the weeds and other things that otherwise will want to occupy those spaces and compete with the trees. But it's not clear to me right here, on exactly how that's to be managed. So it may be
Would it be possible? Would it be possible to get answers back to the HOA and the stewardship committee on those issues?
Absolutely. Yes, that's only fair.
Thank you, Stuart. Any other folks online that wish to testify or on the phone? Okay. And last call for anybody here in the room. Okay. It's the pleasure of the board. Will motion to close or continue the hearing.
So going back to staff comment number 2, the question was whether we should see an open space management plan for this area prior to closing the hearing. And so, you know, given the public testimony and the other testimony we've heard from Dave tonight, where is the board on that? I think this is a good question for Mark.
Yeah, I think that this would be a very good time to take a pause and let the applicant meet with the HOA and the steward committee to come up with a maintenance plan that is acceptable to all parties. And that way we have it, and, you know, everyone can be comfortable with what's going to be implemented and managed going forward.
I agree.
Sounds agreeable to me. Jim, any thoughts?
No, I think, given what I just heard from public comment, I think it would be good to have the plan first.
Okay. All right. The chair would entertain a motion to continue the hearing. And do you have a potential date we can squeeze it in?
Gosh, we're gonna have to do it on November 2nd, because there's no way you can get it instantaneously. And that gives you 2 weeks to meet with the HOA. Does that feel like enough?
So as far as answering the questions that I could not answer tonight, those will be solved very quickly. And Stuart, as far as the ability to meet with the stewardship committee, if if we can, satisfy the submittal requirements for the November 2nd meeting, it just means that we need to get together fairly quickly. And is there any logistical issues in regards to the ability to do that? I'm sorry to use the board's time for those internal questions.
I don't see that, Dave. The stewardship meets every 2 weeks, and the board can meet as and when necessary. So I see no likelihood of a problem there.
Sounds good. Quickly before the motion, do we need more photos at all for visualization, or is just?
I think that Martha's suggestion that we go look is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
We can come along, try to do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You were going to make a motion, Frank?
Yeah, I move that this matter be continued to November 2nd.
Is there a second to the motion? All right. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion to continue the hearing for site plan application SP-21-039 to November 2nd, say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Chair votes aye. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Stuart. All right. Next item is site plan application SP-21-038 of Beta Air LLC to amend a previously approved plan for an airport complex. The amendment consists of changing the approved exterior materials, adding a mezzanine, and minor site improvements for an existing 61,062 square foot, 3-story hangar / office building, 1150 Airport Drive. Can you get up the DRB swearing?
Sure, you want to ask for recusals first?
Yes. Are there any board members who wish to recuse themselves?
Yes, I'm recused from this item and the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening. All right, who's here for the applicant?
Hi, Art Klugo, Data Technologies.
Great, thanks.
Chris Gendron, Stantex, everyone's here.
Okay,
We also have Keith Wagner.
all right, Keith.
Wacky with Burlington.
Okay. All right, so we got 5 of you folks there. All right, so this is a new application here, so I'm going to swear you guys in. Do you hereby swear that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
All right, would you like to give an overview of the issue at hand before we dive into the staff comments?
Sure. So this is an amendment to the original application. As happens often with projects, due to site conditions and changes that were made during the project, we're coming back to the board to seek approval for these modifications, changes, and in one particular instance, some trees that were taken out unexpectedly. That's it. High level.
Okay.
Hey,
All right.
Dan, I'm not able, this is Jim, I'm not able to hear the applicant. I was for the last one, but not for this one.
The green button on there, Art? Oh, he's coming to, technical support's coming in here.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
The fake green light, all right.
Much better.
Great, thank you.
I've never been accused of being quiet, so.
Yeah, okay. Do you need that repeated, Mark, or Jim?
Yeah, I didn't hear any of it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, get it, Art.
Yes, certainly. So tonight, we're here to amend a previous application. As is the nature with construction projects, from time to time, changes are required. We had some modifications, some site conditions, as well as some trees unfortunately removed during the process, and we're here to discuss those and remedy those through the discussions.
Thanks, Art. Okay, so we'll walk through the staff comments here. We've got a couple things to go through here. So first item is regarding dimensional requirements. Delilah, you got that scrolling through there on the staff comments? All right, great. Perfect, thanks. Okay, the first item is regarding the maximum building coverage on the additional square footage. Staff notes the applicant is proposing an additional mezzanine. The square footage of the area is unknown. Can you enumerate that additional area so we get it correct for record-keeping purposes? Do you know it off the top of your head, or?
Yes, the mezzanine area is 435 square feet.
Great.
And just to put it out there, Art sent me some numbers just a few minutes ago so that I don't have to write them down, but all the numbers he's gonna say, I have, I think.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I mean, is the mezzanine relevant to building coverage? I mean, a mezzanine is just like an additional semi-floor. What does that have to do with building coverage?
You know, I asked that question too, because people use the word mezzanine, all kinds of things.
What does it mean in this case?
In this particular instance, it's a mechanical equipment mezzanine. There was some equipment that needed to be raised off the ground to allow an egress door to
But
remain.
it's on the outside of the building.
Yeah, it's on the
where it
outside of the
wasn't.
building. It's not on the inside of the building.
So it's on page 15 of the packet. It's shown in red on the right-hand side of the page.
Okay, so,
New and that's a totally, there's no building there today, and this is gonna be a new building
well,
at the
that's
second
building,
level.
that's not what that's not how I understood mezzanine, but I understand your response better.
Do we know the existing? I noticed it says unknown for the existing the building coverage. Do we know that? Do we care? Is it negligible, so we don't want this answer now, or?
Well, it's the airport PUD as a whole, which is why it's unknown.
Never mind.
The large can of worms.
Okay. All right, and it's a very, very small amount of square footage, so, all right. Okay, next item, and it's a big one, but so I won't get into it. I'm gonna read the standard there at the bottom of page 3 of the staff notes first. Where an applicant with umbrella approval proposes a minor change. Well, first, actually, I'll note in the paragraph above it, in the middle there, regarding umbrella approval, staff considers the potential uses are all allowable, in the middle of that paragraph, from the bottom. So now, standard B, 13.09B2B, where an applicant with umbrella approval proposes a minor change in use, the administrative officer may approve the change as an administrative action and grant a zoning permit. Criteria for determining if the change is minor shall include an assessment of projected PM peak hour trip ends and other numerical criteria specified in the umbrella approval. If the applicable numerical criteria are the same or fewer than those specified in the umbrella approval, the change may be deemed minor. Staff considers this provision to be beneficial for Beta since their business is rapidly evolving. And then, top of page 4, extensive comments there from board. And the gist of this is staff recommends the board determine the appropriate use or uses for the property and consider approving a range of uses under an umbrella permit. Because the 3 examples provided below, staff notes, staff considers that one of the below examples of 3 use categories may presently apply to all or most of the use, research facility or laboratory, manufacturing, light manufacturers. And then regarding office space, staff considers it unlikely that the property consists of an office use. So Marla, if I see that the key item is right at the top, you want us to determine the appropriate uses for the property and consider a range of uses for an umbrella permit.
Right, so, this is previously approved as an office and a hangar. Is that still, we understand things evolve, it's not a punishment or anything. Is that still the appropriate category? And what other categories might be appropriate in the next couple of years?
Right.
So that we don't have to see you every 3
And
months.
and if I could, do you understand how an umbrella permit works?
Generally,
Okay, all right, good.
It's a trick
Just so that you don't have to keep coming back to the board.
yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
And just to be clear, there's no challenge to, we've got hangars, it's called hangar/office right now?
Yep, and if that's what it really, really is, then
Right,
Fine.
can we keep hangar/office and just add 3 more uses?
yep.
Okay. Because who knows if you'll go back to having some office space there, or,
Well, it's interesting, in the information and the numbers that I sent Marla here just a little while ago, went back and actually looked at the 61,000 square feet in terms of how we use the space. Roughly 50% of that space is hangar. Another 25% of that is, 25% is hangar, 50% is actually office, and the remaining 25% is R&D. So the as described use is fairly consistent in that the majority, 75% of the building, is hangar or office use, with the added use being the research and development component.
So would you be comfortable? I gather that we need to specify, we need to allocate the square footage according to use, Marla?
Yeah.
At the outset, you do, but then they can alter it as things shift and
Right.
change.
Because it is very fluid. We move back and forth. This is kind of a point in time today. As we build out the space and our needs change, those numbers will fluctuate. It was just interesting to see, based on staff's comment that regarding office, that actually office is nearly the majority of the space that's set aside right now.
Right. And do you see any manufacturing or light manufacturing taking place?
No, the manufacturing, light manufacturing, will happen elsewhere. We do prototyping. We don't consider that manufacturing. We do some prototyping on
An
site.
incident of R&D.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
Well, I'm not picking up something you said. If they want to change their internal proportions, do they have to come here every time, or can we frame it so that?
No, they would just send me a letter.
Okay.
Okay, so how many, again, we can fine tune it during a decision process, but it sounds from the discussion and the thanks for that detail, Art. It's just really adding research facility or lab at this point to hangar and office. Is that where we're at?
And then, Delilah, I just put those numbers that Art sent me in the supplemental folder. It's a file called Data by the Numbers. If we want to share those on the screen. So we could establish those numbers as the initial numbers. And then the other thing I noted is that there needs to be a traffic budget.
Yeah, assigned.
And so Delilah is actually much more familiar with this than I am. Is that typically done by taking the highest trip generating use and saying that's the budget? And if you
exceed that over time, then you would pay the difference.
or is it based more on like what the roads can handle, or how does that budget get established typically?
It's based on the use. It's the IT trip gen.
But it's not the use today. It's whatever worst case scenario.
Yes.
Okay. So we can run that number then without any additional testimony, is what you're saying, because it's the ITE.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm sharing the wrong thing.
And you don't have any reason to not use the ITE for this property. Okay. Okay. So we can do that part
There we go.
without any additional testimony.
Jim and Mark, thoughts on this?
I think that it's fine with the umbrella and the way they've got it sort of outlined.
Okay.
I have nothing more.
Before we leave that item, there is an item in black just below the last staff comment that staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate acceptance of the project by the FAA prior to issuance of a zoning permit. The 7460s were submitted as part of the original zoning permit, so you should have those on file. If you don't have those on file, let us know, and we're happy to get those to you.
Do they require modification because you're modifying the building again?
In this situation, the reason why we had to even get a 7460 for that south addition was because it protruded out into the airfield. And because usually, and if you read the rules, if you're behind a building, you don't need to get a 7460. And that's why this additional mezzanine isn't requiring additional 7460, because we're below and behind.
Okay, and for the benefit of the public and to avoid inside beta language, what is a 7460?
An FAA 7460 is a process that you go through with the FAA. It's a permit application that you submit to determine that your project or your building will not impact FAA airspace or equipment.
Gotcha. Thanks. Okay, moving along. So we go to page 6 of the staff comments. We love this standard. Always
Sorry.
keeps the meter running for everybody. Relationship of proposed structures to the site. The site shall be planned to accomplish a desirable transition from structure to site, from structure to structure, to provide for adequate planting, safe pedestrian movement, and adequate parking areas. The applicant is proposing to change the material of the exterior veil from corten steel to aluminum with corten steel frame. In its decision on SD-20-21, the board approved corten steel mesh as the exterior veil, as the screening for the HVAC unit, and as screening for the dumpsters. Staff notes that staff considers consistency of materials to be a factor in creating desirable transition and recommends the board review the elevations and determine if this criteria continues to be met with the revised material. Delilah, can you bring those up? Staff notes that the board relied upon renderings in making their determination on SD-20-21, which have not been provided as part of this application. So do we have?
Well, as one who always finds renderings suspect anyway, because they're always beautiful, I'd actually do what I usually do and ask Mark what he thinks the difference in how it's going to look is. Going from this from steel mesh to aluminum mesh. Is there a color change?
Well, thank you for the vote of confidence, Frank. But I don't think this is an issue. I mean, both of them are sort of higher end materials. The corten steel has sort of like that, rusted look that's kind of, I don't want to say trendy because I hate that word, but it is kind of trendy these days in a lot of architecture and construction. But I think that if you go to the last page of the packet, I assume that the aluminum sort of mesh material that they're showing on the materials board is what they're proposing. I think that it's an attractive product. I think it'll be fine with that change.
And the applicant agrees with staff's comments about consistency of materials. The aluminum will actually be framed out by the corten, so there'll be that consistency with some of the other materials used on the building. And then Joel and his team have extended that into other features on site, whether it's HVAC enclosures or the dumpster enclosure. So it's not just in one particular area. It's part of a consistent look and feel on site for that particular building. And Joel's happy to answer any questions.
Is what you're calling the mesh what we're looking at now? That sort of overlapping, that lattice appearance?
Yeah, in the lower, it's the lower left hand, not quite, yes, that second image from the left.
Yeah.
On the lower side.
That's okay, that's it.
Yeah.
So what, will it be the blue or the silver or both?
Yeah, it's the silver, Frank.
So, Art, can I ask you a question? Because I just don't remember what the original elevation renderings looked like. Before the revised veil material that's now currently being proposed as the aluminum, that was also a corten steel with a corten steel frame, and now you're proposing an aluminum mesh veil with the corten steel frame still?
That's correct, Mark. Yes.
Okay. No, I think that I still test that I think it's going to be a very attractive building and very interesting building, which is a nice change. So.
But I didn't hear an answer, and it may be my hearing. I didn't hear an answer to the color question.
Mark's correct. The original color was going to be the rusted steel look. That is changing to the aluminum look that you see there on the rendering. But each of those aluminum panels, those vertical panels, are framed out with the corten steel, so it ties in with the rest of the building that you see up front.
So it'll be natural aluminum, not that bluish color that was
Before
on
it was
the
all
other
sort of
page.
brown.
Correct.
Now it's a mix.
It'd be like a bright steel, or a bright aluminum, I guess.
Okay, board members, any further questions on this item? number 3. Okay, thanks. Next item, staff comment number 4 is regarding circulation. So basically, the intended fence realignment also results in the middle of page 7 of the top of page 7 of the staff comments. This intended fence realignment also results in a modification of the configuration of the previously approved connection to the adjacent property. Staff has included a side-by-side comparison. Staff considers the previously approved configuration to provide a safer vehicular and pedestrian circulation pattern, though the current proposal may be acceptable depending on the anticipated volume. Staff recommends the board determine whether to allow the proposed driveway and sidewalk modification. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the right-hand side of the screen and how you envision circulation happening there. And it's so zoomed in, it'd be great if you can talk a little about who's circulating from where on this.
I think the zoomed out one is in the packet too, if that's helpful, Chris.
Yeah, right. So if the history behind this is that that building 6 that you'll see there on the upper left, that is owned by BTV, their landscape maintenance crew. So they want to be able to use that and access the land side, not have to go to the air side to get to the land side. So in a future project that BTV is proposing, they're going to extend their fence, their security fence around that building, so it's not, you don't have to go out to the airfield to access that building. So what Beta's proposing is, let's not make that difficult for them. Let's leave that area open in the meantime, so that way we'll leave that paved, so then when they come in and do that work, they can perform that access. And then what that does is it changes the orientation of our entrance to make that possible, so their maintenance vehicles can get in and out.
Gotcha.
Previously, they wouldn't have been able to make those maneuvers because our drive was shifted to the south.
Right.
So we had to shift it a little bit to the north to allow them to make that angle to get in and out with their maintenance vehicles.
Okay. Thanks. Board members, do we want to allow this proposed driveway and sidewalk modification, or any thoughts on it? Any more questions?
Yeah, Dan, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, Art, is there any reason, and I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale of access, so it's just sort of, I guess one question I wonder is there any way why you can't just compromise and sort of do a hybrid of the previous approval and the current proposal by, rather than crossing twice, just crossing more on a diagonal, sort of like where it sort of says, I think it says A, E, and T on the, I'm looking at the staff comments, the side by side.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. Actually, in the information that we sent Marla just a little bit ago, we provided an alternate layout that I think speaks to your question. The original diagram as proposed, the modification as proposed, is developed that way because it's anticipated that there'll be a sidewalk that will extend further to the right, and that allowed easy connectivity to the sidewalk. If you've been up and down, tried to walk up and down our side of the street, it's very difficult right now because that sidewalk stops. But we do have an alternate option if the board would like us to head in that direction for some period of time until the sidewalk is available. That does essentially what you're talking about, which is we can cut that corner, have one crossing point for pedestrians until such time in the future the sidewalk's installed.
So Delilah is opening that.
Is it in
Right
this,
That's in the beta by the numbers document.
it's in the beta by the numbers document. Okay, I opened up the wrong document then.
All right, I agree with you completely that, without that sidewalk that's running down the whole length of the street, so, that it does get, it's probably tricky to walk down there. So your current proposal, which has the sidewalk with the crosswalk across the curb cut, eventually will be the right way to go. I think you can even do another hybrid again and still have that crossing where sort of it's the A, E, and T line, so that you're not having two crossings in the more trafficked areas. You're not traffic pedestrian crossing across sort of like the entrance to the more used parking lot. Yeah, so yeah,
So can you see the screen then, Mark, with the
I
alternate
can.
proposal?
Yes, I can. Yep. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about on the left-hand side, and eventually you'll get the sidewalk and the crosswalk on the right-hand side along the street. But I think that the one on the left, until that happens, and even once that happens, is still a better solution and still gives Building 6's access.
Yeah, we're happy to move towards option 1 on the screen.
I just have a question. Looking at option 1, is there a sidewalk along the bottom of the drawing that parallels the street?
Yeah, as it goes from the end of the modification there, if you go left,
Yeah.
there's a sidewalk. If you go to the right, there is no sidewalk.
And if you go down, there's a crossing.
Correct.
Okay. If you're going to the right, is there a sidewalk eventually farther down?
You have to go all the way down to the intersection, and you get a crosswalk down at the intersection.
Okay.
So if that sidewalk ever does occur, then that section on the right-hand side of those two alternates could possibly happen.
Okay.
Will happen.
We're not there yet. We don't need that portion
Right.
yet. At
I
this
know.
point.
I'm
Gotcha.
just saying, so the option 1 is the better solution.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's enough information, I think, on that one. Staff on number 4. Number 5, regarding disposal of waste. Just extensive comments there by staff. The gist of which staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide a specific proposal for enclosure and screening for the dumpster prior to closing the hearing. Staff notes the previous approval included corten steel screening and enclosure, which would have matched the previously approved exterior veil, though the exterior veil is now proposed to be aluminum. Thoughts on this, Art?
So I think there's some renderings on the last page of the packet that shows the proposed dumpster enclosure and the materials.
Okay.
Again, to match what we're doing with the change on the building.
There was also a detail provided, I believe.
Yeah,
you sent
that
me
was a
detail
supplement,
yesterday, right?
actually. Yeah.
Yes, yep.
So, yeah, back in the supplemental, there's a file that's just called beta.
Yep.
And that's what Chris sent me yesterday. The second page of that has I'm cheating, I'm
There
looking
you
at it
go.
now.
Yeah. And Frank, there's a good picture of the screening that we're going to use, the aluminum.
All right.
So where does it end? Where is the dumpster shown here? Dumpster screening?
It's the lower elevations there, right? Yeah. And the dumpster itself is shown between the two material pictures. There's a plan view right there.
This is plan view,
All right.
and then these are the sides.
All right. So we've got the detail. Everybody okay with any other further information or questions on the provided provided information, the enclosure and screening? Okay.
No, I'm good, Dan.
All right. Thanks. Jim, you good? You still there?
I'm here. Yep, no issues.
Great. Okay. On to trees. Okay. Proposed landscaping. Whew, there's a lot in here. So the proposed landscaping, the applicant is responsible for providing landscaping with a value of $2,304.78, plus replacement of the 6 removed or damaged trees, etc. Staff considers the replacement of 3 arborvitae with 6 arborvitae at the south end of the parking to be appropriate replacement, has excluded them from this discussion. Staff considers the other elements of the applicant's proposal do not meet the landscape requirements.
So,
And Marla, yeah,
can I
I'm
do a
gonna
little
ask you-
paraphrasing?
Yes, please do.
All right, so there's 1, 2, 3 elements of required landscaping for this project. There is the required minimum landscaping. Anytime you do a building addition, it's that 3% on the value of the building. So they're doing this little tiny building addition, and so they have a small amount of landscaping required based on that. They also, despite some pretty vehement testimony on behalf of Stewart Construction during the last hearing, ended up removing some trees that they were required to retain. And they are very sorry, and Carolyn is very mad at them. So they need to replace those trees. And then the, hang on. And then there are trees that are proposed to be removed because of the work that they're doing. So new proposal to remove trees. And I guess there is the fourth thing, which is that there's a couple trees down where the dumpster is. No, that's the trees that are proposed to be removed that weren't previously proposed. So they're down where the dumpster's going. They're going to take out some existing trees and they're going to put in some new trees. And that staff thinks is pretty much a wash. They're taking out 3 existing arborvitae. They're adding 6 arborvitae. Staff's pretty much ignored that. It seems like they're good on that element. So it's the question of, are they doing enough new landscaping, and then are they doing enough to replace the improperly removed trees?
Invite the applicant or come up to a microphone or.
So, I'm Keith Wagner,
Thanks, Keith.
and I apologize in advance because I know Marla's been working with Carolyn, who's much more fluent at this than I am, but I think I have it understood. Taking the 6 arborvitae that we're replacing the 3 off the table, out of the issue, we have 6 trees that have been removed either during construction or were damaged and aren't going to make it. And we had 1 honey locust within those 6 trees that we had planned on transplanting, but it's a fall dig risk. So it was determined that it would be removed. So 6 trees, mature trees. They include a 6-inch caliper crabapple, a 7-inch caliper spruce, a 14-inch caliper spruce, a 17-inch caliper pear tree, the 11-inch honey locust that I mentioned, and then finally a 3rd spruce. And using the Purdue tree value formula that Marla had recommended us use, the replacement value on those trees is $22,349. And that formula is quite extensive. It looks at species, it looks at site, it looks at their condition, and also their size. And in a memo to Marla from Carolyn dated September 10th, we're proposing to replace those 6 trees with 6 new trees. A 4-inch caliper crabapple, 3 12-foot to 14-foot spruce, because you typically value a tree based on their, an evergreen on their height. We're adding a 4-inch caliper pear and a 4-inch honey locust. That replacement cost for those is $14,629. And so there's a difference of $7,720. Now this is a little different than a previous cost estimate that Carolyn had put together for the replacement trees, where I felt that her multiplier that a typical landscape contractor uses when they buy a tree. They multiply it by, 2.8 to 3 times. It covers the guarantee, planting, etc. And she was using a 2.5 multiplier. So I bumped that number up to 2.8. So we still have a deficit of $7,720. And like I said, I'm stepping into this like a relief pitcher. So Marla, you might want to, or I would recommend that you and Carolyn regroup when she returns from vacation. But the intent is to provide these trees.
And whatever shortfall in the replacement cost, we're prepared to work with the airport and have those funds committed to the airport landscape master plan so that it's part of that beautification process that's been laid out already.
Frank, have you been here for the airport landscaping overall plan at all?
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Can you explain what that is for Frank's benefit?
Larry?
Yeah, here.
And the podium also has a functioning microphone if you guys are feeling crowded.
A couple of years ago, it was determined that, every time we come forward with an application from the airport, it's very difficult sometimes to get the landscaping involved because of our land use, okay? So we went through and developed with Wagner Hodgson and Carolyn that they were talking about.
Is this the across the street plan?
Yeah.
This is from the intersection of Williston Road all the way up to Kirby Lane with beautifying, trees, fencing, paths, all that type of thing. So for example, we have to get approval, site plan approval every time we do a portion of this. We came through several months ago, 6 months ago, and received approval 21-20, which approved $57,954 in value, okay? We did that because we were doing the terminal integration project, which was 21-18, and we needed to commit $33,477.71 to that, which gave us a balance of about, what's that, $24,000. As part of our application for the zoning permit for what we're calling the Gateway Project, which is off Williston Road going down Airport Drive, we were required to provide a spreadsheet, which is being reviewed by Delilah right now for zoning permit approval. So what they're proposing to do is for us to add this $7,000 plus or whatever you work out to that, and to take away from the balance of between the $33,000 and the $57,000. We do know outstanding is the hotel. When or if that happens, they have until May to apply for their permit application or their zoning, because they asked for an extension of a year. And we understand, as we talked in the meeting with staff last week, that we need to come back and add to our landscaping plan. We also had a sign, sculpture, whatever you want to call it, that was removed from that approval of 21-20, which could add some more value, which Wagner Hodgson is working on. So all we're asking here to do is I'll revise that spreadsheet that you already have to reflect that 7,000 or whatever you end up working out towards that, which will more than take care of. They'll commit that to our Gateway project off Wilson Road on Airport Drive.
I have two comments. I don't remember where we came out on the across the street plan. Does that have general approval from the board?
Yes. That was approved in your absence.
So that's not open to revision here. That's
correct.
The way it is, right?
Yes.
Secondly, I want to question or at least inquire about this multiplier. Does the developer's definition of value comport with our definition of value? When I mean, that's a lot of elasticity. Well, 2.5, how about the cost of the tree?
Right. So I, in this case, would probably do what I do when somebody tells me how much a road is going to cost. And I would go to the person who builds roads or the person who installs trees and ask if these values seem correct.
Well, that skirts the issue.
So it's always been installed cost, and they are allowed to include the cost to install it. And
Would you mind, I'm sorry, I'll try to remember my hearing aids. It's really hard to understand you.
so they are allowed to count the installed cost, and they always have been.
How about this maintenance stuff? That seems to me to be an entirely separate question.
Yeah, and that's where I would want to go, and I'd want to talk to the arborist and say, is this a number that you would consider the cost of a tree, or is this inflating the value inappropriately?
And I suspect, obviously, because I'm asking the question, I suspect the latter.
So just to add to that, there is a difference between buying a retail tree and having a commercial landscaper install a tree, which is what Keith was referring to, and that we do get a warranty with that. That is part of what we pay for that tree, to have that tree installed. So if it dies, they have to come back and replace that tree.
Which argues against, if anything, argues against a maintenance factor in assigning cost.
Well, I was leaving the maintenance piece off to the side, Frank, because that's a different piece, but you know, we don't want to make this a big deal. Listen, if the multiplier is 2.5, we're happy. It's not a big shift in the cost here. We really would like to support the airport, do what we think is the right thing to do per the land development regulations for the project and the community, and move this item on. And the difference between 2.5 and 2.8 on this project is, staff I'm sure has plenty of.
Well, maybe it's a difference. I mean, I don't know. I don't have enough information, but might be the difference between 1.5 and 2.8. The tree cost 1, and what is the installation cost? I don't want to argue about it because I just don't know.
Well, you are. I mean, I kind of take offense to call me a liar.
I was not.
Well, you're implying it, and I don't appreciate it. We have the cost of a 4-inch caliper tree. I know what that costs at a nursery, about $1,500. Then you ship it, then you plant it, and you guarantee it, and I never said anything about maintenance.
I thought that's what
I said was planting it, mulching it. You put guy wires in, it adds up. Now you may find a landscape contractor that does it for 2.5 multiplier. The 4 or 5 that we use around here that are what I consider the top, the best, use a 2.8. So I think Art makes a good point. If you want to call it 2.5, fine. But I know exactly what these trees cost because I called the nurseries. I know what they cost sitting at the nursery. So
well,
that's all I'm saying is that. And I'd appreciate you to respect my 33 years in this profession. That's all I'm asking.
My broader point was, what does cost mean under the terms of the LDR? That's the question I was asking.
Marla, any more information on that?
I'm going to look up the specific language so I'm not caught out misremembering. Yeah. As suspected, there is not a specific definition of landscape cost. I think the relevant portions of the section on landscaping budget requirements are the Development Review Board shall require a minimum planting costs for all site plants, as shown in table 3.13.9 below, which is the table about the breakdown, 3% for the first 250,000, etc. Some credit may be granted for existing trees or for site improvements other than tree planting as long as the objectives are not reduced. The landscaping budget shall be prepared by a landscape architect or professional landscape designer. End of section.
Quick question. In approving budgets for numerous other projects over the years, what has been the practice of the DRB, looking at, essentially installed costs?
Installed cost, yes.
Okay.
And to Keith's point, which is a really, really important point, we're developing a campus out there. We have a certain vision that we're working side by side with the airport. That requires a certain quality of product. The corten, the aluminum, the design of the buildings, the plantings. There is no doubt you can go find somebody to put a tree in at less than a 2.8. We do not believe it's consistent with the comprehensive plan by doing something like that, or what the airport goals are, or what Beta's goals are. Won't get any argument from me about finding it cheaper, Frank. You can do that. But is that really the intent for what we're trying to do here as a community?
Thanks. Let me just kind of move on here. I don't know if we're going to get any farther on this, unless you have.
I don't know the answer, Art. If it's cheaper, does that mean it's worth? I didn't mean to start down that road. I was asking what our definition of cost is. Installed cost seems not an unreasonable parameter if that's our history, if that's what we've done, but we should require some consistency.
Okay, well, we don't have a standard value for a tree or a standard multiplier in the LDRs, so we'll leave it to staff to, if they saw something in the calculation. I want to get to the larger issue, which was the explanation of the $7,720 difference, the deficit. Do I have that correct, Marla?
Yep.
Okay. And then we also have your comment in number 7 at the bottom of page 9. The applicant still needs to provide $2,304.78 in new landscaping to address the building addition. Staff notes that the previous MS-20-01 allows this to be located on or off site. No proposal has been provided. Any thoughts on that $2,000?
Yes, so there's a couple things there, and certainly similar to the replacement of the trees, any deficit that would come out here would get added to that in the contribution to support the airport landscape master plan. My understanding, and I may be not reading this correctly, but we had an initial construction cost of $283,000 and $731. The landscape budget was calculated 3% on the first 250, 2% on the remaining, which would have been $33,731. And these are some numbers that Marla has that I sent over to you, which would have put the initial landscaping budget at $81.74 per table 13.9. Now, this is an amendment. This isn't a new project. So from the applicant's perspective, the cost or the value of the new landscaping should reflect the 2%, not the 3%, because the total construction value actually went from 283 plus the 76 to 360. We're not starting over. So at that point, because we're above the threshold, it should be a 2% calculation and not the 3%, which means that when you look at the landscape budget, you add another 2% based on the $76,000 of construction value. We have a budget of $9,711 that we need to provide for this project. We're actually providing $10,040 of in-place landscaping. So we have a credit coming back of $328.86, which we're not asking for, but we're not asking to be charged additional landscaping either.
Marla, we're in the weeds here, or I am.
Delilah, did you follow?
I follow.
Can you
I
bring that
follow
memo
the
up on the screen?
argument. I don't have all of the numbers, and I haven't looked at your numbers.
Okay,
until
so
this
that's
meeting,
in the, so all of the, I had the advantage of having this by the numbers document up on my screen while Art was talking. So I did follow. If you want to pull that up. I don't know, and the reason I ask you, Delilah, is in the case of a building addition, do we ever consider it on top of the initial building cost, or do we just not, because it's usually like a very distinct, like one project ends and the next project
In the
starts?
case of a building addition, we don't. with a new application, we consider it as a standalone, separate and apart from previously approved additions.
Yeah.
I have not treated them as accretions upon other additions.
But this project is not yet complete, so, I mean,
True.
it's not the hill I'm gonna die on. If that's the argument the board wants to accept, then
Then I throw it
Fine.
to the board to consider.
Dan, can I offer a comment?
Yeah, go, please, Mark, go.
Okay. I hear both sides of this argument. I also hear, Art's pretty clearly stating, that I don't think this is the hill he wants to die on either in regards to landscaping and the overall big picture of what Beta is doing at the airport. But I do follow Art's logic and the way he's looked at this, and I would have looked at it the same way as an architect sitting on the other side of the table, which I often have to. And this is, I would look at it as an amendment to something that's in progress. So I would say you're looking at it as the 2% calculation that he has looked at it. We have had other projects which are additions to already built projects where we look at it as a standalone. So whatever the addition costs, you recalculate the 3, 2, 1, however it plays out. And so I'm comfortable with the way Art is proposing it. And I'm also comfortable with his proposal for the 7,000 and change to go towards the master plan landscaping. I think the bigger picture question we need to ask, and maybe it's already been answered, but when we always look at these deficit landscape donations to the overall, is whether the initial project is adequately landscaped. And do we feel that the replacement plantings do achieve adequate landscaping compared to what's been removed? And once we've answered that question, we can then look at whether the deficit can go to, or the additional monies can go to the master planning, or whether we still need additional plantings.
Yeah, and to follow up on your question and comment from the previous applicant, Frank, we have 4-inch trees here, so they're fairly substantial. We did look at and talk with the landscape team about trying to increase the caliper of that, and it does get to when you get to that size tree. So we were looking at say 5 or 6 inches. When you do get up into that realm, it's just as Marla described it. But we felt again that the smaller than 4 inches was not appropriate for the site, and so we elevated the size of the trees that we were bringing on property.
So I have a question about these numbers that you were talking about. When you're talking about the cost of the landscaping that's actually currently proposed, that doesn't include the replacement plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. This is just.
As Marla described it, this calculation that we were talking about just a few minutes ago is separate from the calculation for the replacement cost for the trees that Keith talked to.
Right, and I agree, by the way, I agree with both you and Mark on your calculation of, for a project that's in process, that is. This is just a correction, and you should have the benefit of the more lenient calculation for that.
Thank you.
On the other point,
So the question that Mark asks is the board to consider is whether the site is adequately landscaped. Is there a good sheet for showing?
well, what power do we have at this point? I mean, let's assume,
Well, I guess it's for the replacement trees, right?
I don't know, Keith, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, I think that plan shows it. I mean, it's a relatively small area. And it's full of a lot of circles, which are trees. With that, what you don't see is all the underground utilities. So we felt that we have populated this site with as many trees and shrubs and grasses as possible.
Does that address staff comment number 8 there on the replacement plantings, which have not, is that where we're at here?
So we haven't touched on 8 yet. 8 was something, monkey wrench we got at the last minute. But it does seem to address 6 and 7.
So what we're looking at here. Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
But I think Mark's point was, are the replacement trees adequate? And I think where in the planting plan, and it was approved by the town arborist that we could replace the trees that were moved by 4-inch caliper, I think we're doing better than that with the spruce that we're putting in that are 12 to 14 foot in height. So we're making an honest, concerted effort to fulfill the obligations, do the right thing, make a handsome campus for Beta, and follow your rules. We have, I mean, if you just look at that, there's a lot of plant material in a very small area. Because once you get back, you're not planting anything because of the FAA regulations. So we're sort of front-loading the landscape, if you will, on the front of the building.
All right, so item number 6 and 7, any other further discussion or questions on 6 and 7? On the other islands? Okay, so number 8. On September 23rd, the applicant provided a supplemental plan indicating that plantings previously approved to be installed on the south side of the building are not feasible due to site conditions. They have proposed replacement plantings which have not yet been reviewed. Staff further recommends the board continue the hearing to allow review of the south plantings.
Well, that's,
Any further comment on this, Marla?
Yeah, so this was something that just kind of came in
And this is
just before we published the packet. And so we didn't really have chance for Craig to review this, but it looks like on the south side of the building, there's some additional trees that need to be removed. And you know, I guess we could just think about that as a separate application, but I hate to do that. I'd rather, because then it needs a separate warning and everything else.
That, I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong, but as I understand it, that additional tree that had to be removed was the spruce. The third 12 to 14 foot spruce. Prior to that, we had the crabapple, which was in the way of a new trench. The 7-inch spruce was in the way of a trench for the electrical duct. The 14-inch spruce was in the way of a new trench for the electrical duct as well. The 17-inch pear was, the roots were damaged because of its proximity to a new sewer line. The 11-inch honey locust I mentioned was slated to be transplanted. It's in the way, it can't be moved now, so it's been determined to be, we created a value for it and are replacing it. And then the final tree was this additional spruce tree.
Delilah, can you please pull up page 21 of the packet? Keith, I can point to the plantings that we're referring to here. They're not actually trees.
Hi, this is Jim. The applicant's microphone is difficult to hear again.
Yeah, I just found out that it wasn't on. Sorry about that, Mark.
So to the right of the screen that's showing right now, there's 2 little red lines and there's a call out there. Nope, to the right. Yeah, that red call out was what I was referring to.
plantings designated for the zone, unable to be planted due to poor site conditions, replacement plantings as shown. Okay, thank you.
So, not totally understanding what's happening with that.
Just because I was working very closely with Carolyn on this. What I can say about that is if you see at the entryway, the southern entryway to the left. So let me back up. The south side, we put in that mezzanine. What that did is that restricted some of the additional landscaping that we were trying to put in. There was also some other constraints with vehicle charging stations, and we thought it better, the plants would have a better chance of surviving if they were located in a grass area, not on the industrial side of the building. So
that blue area, the large blue area to the lower left, is where those plantings were relocated.
Right.
So it's not a new planting plan. We're just putting them in a different place to allow them, as Chris just said, to survive and flourish.
So it's the same plants.
Same plants, and then there's and you can see the blue circle tree. Right,
Where the dumpster used to be.
right.
But that blue circle tree was already in your list of 6.
Correct. The tree, the blue stuff at the bottom, the left, where they're bubbled, those are the things that were on the south side in the inclement
Yep.
area,
Yep.
and we are still putting them on the site, but not in where we had originally proposed them.
Uh-huh. And the blue tree was on the original submission for this application? The tree that's shown in blue on this plan?
When you say original, like back in March?
No, like for this hearing.
Oh, right.
Yes, right.
yes.
Okay. Okay, so what you're saying is what we're seeing on the screen in blue right now, there's a tree that we've already talked about. So we're ignoring that. And then there's the 3 red lines up at the top that say
Plantings designated for this zone unable to be planted due to poor site conditions, replacement plantings as shown down.
So it's not really replacement plantings, it's like relocated as
Correct.
shown.
It's a really good description, Marla. It should have been relocated, and
Yeah.
apologize for the
That's fine.
confusion there.
Thanks.
Okay.
Really good description.
So if the board feels like relocating them from the south to the west is not a big deal, then I don't think it's a big deal.
Looks
But that
okay
was
to
not
me.
clear.
Board members?
I don't think it's a big deal.
Same.
All right, so, and we've got this whole thing worked out to staff for you got what you need on as far as budgets and trees and the differences and the calculations. You've got the information you need?
Yeah, and I'll have the city arborist review and approve the multiplier prior to a zoning permit. And if that's different, it's gonna be different by a small enough number that it can be made up in the off-site landscaping.
Okay, thanks. Board members, any last questions for the applicant? See if, before we do it, any public comment? Okay,
No, I'm
any
good.
members of the public here in the room that wish to testify on this matter? Okay, and is there anybody online or on the phone that wishes to testify? Okay. Chair would entertain a motion to close or continue the hearing.
Dan, I'll make a motion that we close site plan application SB 21038, 1150 Airport Drive, Beta Air.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Okay, ayes have it. All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's do a 5-minute recess because I need to use the bathroom and stretch our legs. Next item on the agenda.
You're welcome to stand if
You
you'd
can
like.
stand, you can sit.
Now you're back in the-
Sketch plan application.
Oh, that's as high as it goes.
I won't swear you in, so you're on Scout's honor here.
Scout's honor.
Okay. Sketch plan application SD-21-23 of Greenfield Capital LLC to consolidate 3 existing lots into 1 lot of 19 acres for the purpose of construction of a 1,333,777 square feet, 2 to 3 story office and light manufacturing building, 419 parking spaces, and associated site improvements at 443 Community Drive. Who is here for the applicant?
So the applicant is John Illick representing Technology Park, and we have Roland Gronfeld representing On Logic, and our architect, David Roy from Weeman Lamphere.
Okay. Great. Well, if you'd like to give an overview of the project, that'd be great, and then we'll look at the staff comments.
Yeah, Roland's going to introduce the project and his company.
Green light on, you hear him okay?
No, we're getting a no signal from the back of the room.
It's brighter green, it gets.
There you go. I think that's better. Yes, that works. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of background on the company, just give a little bit of an overview. OnLogic has been founded in 2003, and we've moved to South Burlington in 2007. So we've been here for quite a while, currently in the Meadowlands Business Park. We actually originally were called Logic Supply. In 2019, rebranded to OnLogic. We have offices in Vermont, headquarters over here, North Carolina, the Netherlands, Taiwan, and Malaysia. What we do is we make industrial computers for very difficult environments. Think warehouse automation, factory automation, those kinds of things. We've been growing pretty rapidly, about 25 to 30% a year, consistently throughout our history, and we expect that to continue certainly also in the next 5 years or so. Our current facility is about 36,000 square feet, so we're looking to really go to a larger facility to house and house the team and add the production and warehouse capacity that we need. In our calculations, we are currently planning for about 400 people in this new building. That will be happening over the course of probably 7 to 10 years or something like that. Another thing to add here is that we really focus on very high-paying jobs. The average salary at the company is about $100,000 a year. We really want to create an environment that is a great environment for our employees. It is clean manufacturing, light manufacturing in the definition of the DRB, I'd say, or the city. We are focusing on a very energy and efficient building, solar power, EV charging stations, etc. The other thing that's really important to state here is that the building is laid out obviously very close to the interstate and very visible from the interstate, and obviously also very visible from Technology Park. So we want to make sure that this building is a really nicely designed building, a beautiful building, I might say, that is going to be, in our minds, an attractive building for the area and also an attractive building to work in. I think that's kind of the high-level overview.
I have a preliminary question.
Yes.
Please. Will it be aesthetically compatible with the whales?
It will be.
We'll work on that. I hope everything is, but thank you. There's a second piece to our project in addition to the building for OnLogic, and that is what's referred to as a subdivision, although it's actually combining 3 lots. So if we look at the drawing up on the screen, you'll see something called subject area. That really comprises 3 approved building lots in Technology Park. We're requesting the combination of those 3 into a single lot. So there's a subdivision piece and there's a site plan approval piece. Just by way of orientation there on that drawing, to the right of that pink subject area, which the building doesn't show there, is where we just finished building a FedEx distribution facility. To the north, which is that big black roof, that's the existing 30 Community Drive facility. Obviously, you can see the interstate. As Roland mentioned, one of our prime objectives is actually to be very visible. Sometimes, along the interstate, we try to conceal buildings. In this case, we're going to be very proud of this building. It will be an outstanding piece of architecture, and it's our great pleasure to be able to see it as much as possible from the interstate. It's going to be more visible from the interstate, frankly, than it will be from Community Drive, and that's just based on the topography of the land there. For the most part, Community Drive sits about 8 to 10 feet below the level of of the lot, and so it's going to be less visible from Community Drive than it will be from the interstate.
Speaking of the FedEx building, it would be nice, are we gonna see an illustration showing the FedEx building, showing the built-up area?
We're not intending to show that building tonight.
Okay. Down the road, okay.
We're just at sketch here, remember that. So.
I did have a question, a historical question from
Yep.
when you were before us for the FedEx building a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
There was supposed to be a path that you were offering as a recreation path as part of that application. Is that on here somewhere?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and that'll come up in discussion a little later on. But since you've addressed it, there is a exercise / walking path that sort of circumnavigates this property, the interstate property. And during the FedEx construction, we had to relocate that path a little bit. We will need to do the same thing in this project, but the intent is to keep that entire path.
Okay, and we'll see it in more detail later.
You'll see it on the plans, yeah. Yeah.
Let's get on with the items here. Quick question before we continue. Roland, what's the plan for the existing location of Medellin?
Good question. So we don't quite know yet. We depending on, it's going to take us about 2 years to build this new building, and depending on where we're at that point, we may or may not decide to continue to hold on to the building. We might lease it out for a period of time and then reoccupy it or something like that. But the ideal is to move the whole business into the new building initially, and then we'll have to kind of see what happens from there.
Great. Okay, thanks. All right, let's get on with the staff comments here. And again, remember that this is sketch, so let's just try to give general guidance to the applicant and hit the big highlights here, and let's stay out away from calipers of trees if we can.
I can assure you we will.
All right, so the first item is the maximum building height. The requirement is 35-foot flat, 40-foot pitch, and the proposal is 46 feet. The board should provide feedback on whether they will allow the requested height at this sketch plan level of view. Staff considers the location relative to the interstate, the location of the airport approach cones, and the requirement for compatibility between planned development patterns to be factors pertaining to whether the board should allow the proposed height. And I guess I'll cut to the quick here with the architect. Why does this need to be 46 feet?
For a couple of reasons. Can you go to one of the site plans? The entire building is not 46 feet. Right. Yeah, any one of those. So you'll see the plan orientation is plan north, so up is north. On the eastern side, there is a vertical rectangle. That portion of the building is 3 stories. That's the only part that exceeds the actual building height. That was done in an attempt to consolidate. You can see the 3-story office building is depicted on that. The intent is to consolidate the offices to be more efficient to use internally. It gives better access to eastern light, views out to the east as well, and better connection to the warehouse and other parts of the building. But the only part that's actually 46 feet high is that portion of the building.
3-story, great.
Yep.
Okay.
Is everybody clear about the phases here?
Marla,
I
I'll
can
get
get
to
into
that in
that.
a moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a moment. Let me add to what David has just said there. The entirety of Technology Park is in the airport cone district. And for each of our applications, we have to get FAA approval for our building height and really, frankly, for our cranes when we're setting the steel. All the office buildings we've already constructed are 3 stories, which is an efficient use of ground. You cover less area when you have that height. This zone allows 70% lot coverage. We're about 30%. So we tend to build not to the maximum lot coverage. The fewer stories you have, the more ground you cover. So there's not only operational reasons, there's good site planning reasons why that height is useful. And we are compatible with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Just to move the question along, Marla, do we have standards for allowing waivers to height?
Yeah, so it's immediately above. In this zoning district, the board may approve a structure with height in excess of the max allowable with additional setbacks. And it appears that they are meeting those additional setbacks.
We're considerably in excess of those additional setbacks.
Right, okay. And then in terms of what are the heights of the other buildings in this park?
So the two buildings up on Kimball Avenue are three-story buildings. They're just under 50 feet. And the original office building we built, which is 55 Community Drive, is now 725 Community Drive, is about 65 feet.
So evidently these have been approved before, Bob. Okay, all right, Frank, go ahead.
Well, you asked my question, but are those buildings now this building is right up against the interstate, right?
I wouldn't say it's right against it.
Well, but it's very
the
close.
property abuts the interstate, yeah.
Right, but the proposed, the three-story building is closer to community.
The
drive.
southern edge of this proposed building will align almost identically with the face of the FedEx building that's adjacent nearby.
Frank, recall that.
Where's the interstate here?
Bottom of
To the
Bottom
south,
of the page.
bottom
Page,
edge.
It's actually off the bottom of the page.
Oh, okay, all
Yeah,
right.
recall that the interstate requires a 150-foot setback where no building can occur. And so our setbacks are well in advance of that. So I would say we're probably 300 feet from the interstate.
I'll cut it short for my question. If it's not an FAA problem, I don't care.
Yeah, it's definitely not an FAA
Right.
problem.
Okay, other board members?
In terms of the height issue, I guess one thing, how does this, maybe we were talking about this and I just missed it. How does it compare in height to the FedEx building, the 46-foot section, the three-story office?
The highest point of the FedEx building is probably right around 30 feet.
Okay, but in terms, I know, but from a grade standpoint, how does it line up the roof?
The dirt we're talking about now is higher in elevation than where the FedEx building is. And that's just based on the existing topography of the land.
Okay, so this building is going to be perceived as being significantly higher than 16 feet taller than the FedEx building.
Yeah, it's so far away from the FedEx building. I don't know that most people will draw that comparison. You know, it's sort of good. They're all sort of standalone buildings out there, and the buildings up on Kimball Avenue are fairly much side by each, and you would notice a difference there. But these buildings are so far apart; they're going to be 1,000 feet apart.
Right. Okay. I mean, I'm a little leery of this, just given the fact that it is adjacent to the highway. It can be the most beautifully designed building. I'm just a little concerned about the height. And I guess one question I have is, you've got 15-foot floor-to-floors on this. Is that designed that way? I mean, because for general office, that seems excessive.
Yeah,
and that you could for a three-story.
The floor-to-floor actually will be a little less than that. So we're compelled to measure to the highest point. And there is a sort of an entry element that's the tallest point of our office sequence. And we're also compelled to measure to the top of rooftop equipment.
Yeah.
Our floor-to-floor height will be somewhere in the 14 to 14.6 range.
Yeah, the roof. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt.
And in order to have a 9.5-foot ceiling, which is really necessary in a large open office environment, still have some interstitial space for your utility, ductwork, and piping, you need about 14 to 14.6 floor to floor.
Hi, Mark. The actual 80% of the primary roof over that business portion of the building is 42 feet. That's the actual roof elevation. That's 14 foot per floor. There is a roof element that sticks up over the entry portion of the building that we'll see later. that is at the
Okay.
46-foot elevation. But as he stated, we also want to include, provisions for mechanical equipment and the like.
Right, okay.
So the mechanical equipment can be sliced a couple different ways. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the way you're slicing it today, but I think at the next stage of review, just making that really clear, like what all the various things are, would really address some of these concerns.
We'll have a rooftop equipment plan at our next meeting.
Yeah, that equipment hasn't been defined yet.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yep.
All right, thanks. Board members, let's move on if it's okay. All right, next one, staff comment number 2. This is describing, the applicant has described the project as a business and factory use project, which is not a use defined in the land development regulations. The current location of the business at 35 Thompson Street is defined as light manufacturing. So the question is, staff recommends the board confirm that the proposed location will have the same function as the existing location and specifically will continue to comply with the portion of the definition pertaining to the city's performance standards. Staff notes that this is not the correct fit. Other uses are allowable.
Yeah, so as we all know, businesses morph as they go through their lives. Right now, our principal uses would be a business occupancy, i.e. office, light manufacturing, we will call it light manufacturing / assembly, and then warehouse.
Okay. Marley, comment on that or?
Nope, all of those things are fine.
All right. Board members, want to move on? Okay. Subdivision standards. Applicant is proposing 2 driveways. Staff recommends, could the applicant describe why the western driveway is located where it is and identify potential concerns at this sketch plan level of review?
So, as you can see from our site plan, we're segregating car traffic from truck traffic, which is responsible, site planning design. It's not 100% necessary, but it's good planning. What we're doing here, however, is we're combining 3 lots into one. Those 3 lots each would be entitled to at least 1 curb cut each. So our perspective on this is we're going from what would be 3 allowable curb cuts to 2 curb cuts. The site also has some interesting topography. On the very west side, which is where the truck driveway will be, the land is very close in elevation to the existing community drive. So sight lines there are very good. As you move east, the land rises pretty rapidly to a point where it's about 8 feet above community drive. It would be very challenging to put a curb cut there without a substantial cut in the ground. You can kind of see it in that graphic. And then when you get all the way over to the eastern driveway where the cars will enter, that road is also fairly close to at grade with the existing land. So it's a really wise place to put the 2 curb cuts. And we believe 2 is better than 3. Could it be 1? Potentially. It would not serve our function at all well. It would not serve our function at all well because the driveway would have to be in the middle where you could peel truck traffic off to the west, car traffic off to the east, and that's based on the functions, the interior functions of the building. It would result in more asphalt, which wouldn't particularly be a good thing. So we believe this is the most expedient and efficient site plan.
What's the distance between the driveways?
It's about 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I think it's 880 feet.
Jeff?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the number?
880 feet between the 2 drives as they're shown.
Yeah.
Okay. Marla, any thoughts? Is this allowable to have the 2 driveways like this?
Yeah, so this is hopefully to prompt John's really nice presentation that he gave when he came and talked to me about the location of the driveways initially, and to kind of talk about how they had looked at some alternatives, what those alternatives were, and why they ended up where they did.
Yeah. So I hope I've described why we've done what we've done, which is primarily to segregate the truck traffic from the car traffic.
Right.
We do recognize that the western driveway is relatively close, although not terribly close, to what will be a Tilly Drive connector. Tilly Drive connector on this map that you're looking at here would be in the very upper left-hand corner of the drawing. And it will require, we've had some conversations with Public Works, it will require coordination if and when, and we hope it's when, that Tilly Drive connection occurs. It's on the town plan. We want it, neighbors want it, so we're assuming that that Tilly Drive connection is going to occur. There clearly are some logistical concerns there with wetlands, but at some point it's going to exist, and we know our driveway will be probably within 200 feet of it. And it will require some coordination there, and we're prepared to have those discussions with Public Works and Planning and Zoning.
Okay.
Can you squeeze that entrance, that western entrance over a little bit more to the east? I mean, have you gone as far east with that?
I believe we've gone as, yeah, we've gone as far east as we're comfortable going. When you enter where we're entering there, you have to make sure you have good lines of sight to both the east and really up the north of Community Drive there. And the lines of sight we have where we've situated that driveway give us best lines of sight that we can have.
Okay, I guess it would be great at the next level just to, even an email from Public Works saying they're okay with the hypothetical location and stuff, just to confirm. I don't doubt you, just,
yeah,
it's nice just so we're not going, well, be sure, and it's hard because the location of the driveway could potentially constrain that future connectivity, so I just want to be sure Public Works is well aware and.
We're definitely on board with having those discussions.
Great. All right, thanks. I have a question for staff, farther down on this discussion. Staff recommends that the board authorize independent technical review of the applicant's traffic impact study so that it can be reviewed prior to the next level of review. Is that a requirement or?
Which?
The
review
independent technical review.
It is not.
So-
But we often do it because we don't have an in-house traffic expert.
So I can address that also.
Yeah, sure.
We are commissioning, in fact, it's already 80% done, a traffic study.
Right.
We will have that by our hopefully preliminary final plat hearing, but we'll have that for our next meeting. The results of that. And we've coordinated that study with both Public Works and VAOT.
Well, but Marla's talking about an independent review.
Exactly, and I'm just sort of wondering do we have standards that trigger an independent technical review? Because it is an added cost to the applicants. And
Right.
so.
You mean reviewing our?
Yes,
I see
reviewing
what
your
you're
review.
saying. Yeah.
Exactly. So do we have standards for that? In other words, do we have to?
Usually when it's something other than straightforward ITE, we do have an independent technical review. If there's, internal capture, if there's offsite mitigation, if there's offsite improvements, turning lane changes, we do commission that, or the board chooses to do that because we don't have that in-house expertise. Same as if, we didn't have in-house stormwater expertise, we would have a stormwater expert review the plans.
Right.
So
Okay.
when we did FedEx, as you know, we put in traffic signalization in the eastern connection between Community Drive and Kimball. We also added some turning lanes. Our preliminary findings of this traffic study do not indicate any additional off-site improvements. So I don't believe we'll be coming back with a study that suggests any changes to the geometry or capacity of turning lanes.
All right, thanks. All right, moving
I guess
on.
that's a really good point, though. If the board is interested in independent technical review being done before you see the applicant again, I probably should have made that a red comment, so you guys can go ahead and authorize it.
Well,
I
I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that this is something that we typically do, and, this is definitely a project that's on the larger side that's going to have, you know, quite a bit of parking and trip ends that are associated with it. I'll also play devil's advocate and say this is Tech Park, where there, you know, it's intended to have this type of development and volume. But I still think that it's a good idea to get a second set of eyes and, you know, review the applicant's traffic report, and it's just to make sure that we're in agreement and no additional measures are being recommended or that are warranted. So that said, I would make a motion that we approve technical review of the applicant's traffic impact study.
I didn't pick up some of what
Did
Mark
you just
said.
make a motion? Okay, that's what I thought. All right. So, and I assume this, we would need
Involve
the,
technical review, yes, of the traffic study.
okay, there's been a motion.
I'm sorry.
The motion is to have an independent technical review of the pending traffic study.
Before they submit theirs?
No, no.
No, before the preliminary, at preliminary plat, we would have both the traffic study.
Okay, yes.
And-
I would like the independent reviewer to have the benefit of the applicant's review.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's exactly.
That's what they're reviewing, yeah.
That's what they review, Frank.
Yeah, I would move.
That's why it feels
You would
premature
second
to
that.
me
I would
to
second
be
Okay, motion's been
doing
made.
it now.
Can I ask a question? Is that review undertaken after we apply for or submit our materials for a preliminary final, and it's done in that period,
Oh,
or
you're
is it
welcome to
after the
submit
hearing?
your traffic review as soon as it's done, and then I can just get it started.
Okay, so you'll have an independent review done before the preliminary final hearing.
If you get it to me before you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you would like that to be so, then yes.
yeah, for the preliminary plat, yeah.
It should give some comfort that because this is also an Act 250 project, VAOT scrubs our traffic study quite vigorously.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second
Yeah,
on the table.
exactly, yes. Motion and a second is, all right. All those in favor of the motion as stated by Mr. Bear, say aye.
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 Jim, you there?
Yeah, I'm not in favor.
Chair votes aye.
So
That doesn't pass.
Jim's a nay.
Jim's a nay, yeah.
Okay.
Does it pass still, or?
It does not, you need
'cause we
majority.
Do we have 2 nays?
The one nay, and you need.
No, we need majority of the board.
Which means it has to be unanimous.
Okay.
So motion fails. In that case, that's fine. If the board later changes their mind, it may delay the preliminary plat.
We accept that. I would go back to what I just said, though, that this will get a very vigorous review by VAOT because it's also an Act 250 project. We're using a traffic count based on an employee count that's in excess of IT standards. So you're gonna find that we will find that our study is not aggressively managed.
I got a question here. So after this is built, how many total employees would this whole community drive complex have? Counting FedEx, counting this, counting existing buildings, counting the nice shiny glass ones on the front. And
I would say, I don't have that number, but I can come pretty close. 4, 6, 1,200, 315. We'll be about just under 2,000 maybe.
Okay, is there ever any kind of consideration to some sort of campus? It's a campus of several different uses, but it's a campus of multiple employers. Is there any plans for any kind of in-house transit, like major employers do, so that you don't have 2,000 cars coming to one spot?
So right now, UVM Medical Center does run buses between their location here and their main campus.
Yeah.
But because everybody else is a one-off business, where would you transport them to? There is public bus transportation. I'm not really
Yeah.
quite sure what else could be done.
Yeah, no, it's more of a thing of, I mean, it's, you know, whether it's organized carpooling or, you know, vans that come from all over. I mean, I'm not trying to, and it's not required by any stretch, but
Yeah.
it's one of these things. And I think about other larger projects that, you know, we're growing as a community and we're getting the jobs here, and then you start to sit there and you go, wait a minute, why can't there be some coordination here so that we don't?
I mean, I analogize it to a land covenant for common land. I mean, you guys could easily, these significant employers could easily get together and, you know, have a little bus company in effect by agreement and fund it proportionally or in equal shares to take the burden, lessen the burden somewhat.
Yeah, you will find, we would all find that that's a lot more challenging to execute than, it's a great idea. No argument there. It's very challenging to execute. When you look at where people live, they will live from the islands to Essex County to south of Middlebury. And running a collective bus service and coordinating that at right times, businesses start at different times. It's just very challenging. The public bus service that is readily available, stops at the property line, is available for people to use. So if they were inclined to use buses, I presume they would use buses.
No, I don't see it as, I mean, you can, maybe it is challenging, but it doesn't seem so challenging to me. We have, at outlying areas, we have already carpooling centers. You don't have to solve the problem 100%. Nobody's suggesting your parking lot should be empty. But for example, take the Richmond Commuter Center. You have one bus running to the Richmond Commuter Center at a specific time. If people can make it, great. If not, well, then they can drive their car. Yeah. Essex, you know, I mean, they're dotted all over the place. You could have that kind of limitation on it. It'd be pretty easy to operate.
Yeah, employee incentive programs, et cetera. Will pay for your bus pass, and then and I don't know. We have Facebook pages for everything, or you know, or group chat. And I'm sure hopefully people will start to carpool as they go. Oh, you're in the same neighborhood as me. I didn't know that. You know, we'll see it happen. But it's interesting to see. You know, like, okay, so. And this is just a personal comment. So electric cars are great, and they don't use gasoline and all that, but they don't necessarily change where people live, and it doesn't necessarily change the demand on traffic infrastructure and parking and lights and
one of the challenges,
as well as creating impervious surface. So
one of the challenges is we're not an employer.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in a way, we're no different than Wilson Road.
Yeah.
It's a grouping of businesses in a geographic location, but they're all independently owned businesses.
Yeah.
And so it would be a little bit like herding cats. If we were the hospital with 2,000 employees, it's a lot easier to manage that employee benefit.
Yeah, very well. Point well taken. All right, let's move on here. Thanks for your forbearance with that discussion. So, so back to parking reserved for future use. In order to minimize construction of unnecessary parking, an administrative officer or development review board may approve a site plan with parking reserved for construction at a future date. In granting such approval, the AO or DRB shall specify a time frame during which said parking may be constructed without receipt of an additional site plan approval. In no case shall such time frame exceed 10 years. Removal of parking reserve areas shall require site plan amendment. Staff recommends that the board consider an approach that would approve some of the proposed parentheses, phase one parking for construction at a later date. You guys got a comment on that?
Delilah, can you put the site plan up, please? So when you're designing a facility that's growing as wonderfully and as rapidly as OnLogic is, it's a complex science. You have a piece of land that has discrete boundary, and you want to make sure that you accommodate current conditions and your future growth. So what we're showing here in the lighter color building is our phase one. The darker is phase X, 2 and beyond.
Yep.
And appropriate design would sort of direct you to design the ultimate build out and then go back to what you want to build initially. So we've designed site accommodation, landscaping, stormwater, building footprint, growth areas, even site lighting, stormwater management to accommodate our ultimate growth. What we're asking to build right now is simply phase one. And as you can see from the parking plan, a small amount of parking, under 25%, is in the front yard. If you were to peel away the two northernmost additions to this building, which would be a future phase. No, not that one. No,
over to the right. Yeah.
Those, yeah, so come back to the building area. Come back to the building area. Now go north. Go
The other
way.
other
Go
north. Yeah.
up to right
There you go. Yeah.
That dark brown box and the one immediately to the left of it would be a future phase. Once those are built, that parking is, well, I can see a couple of spaces in the front yard still, but they're marginally in the front yard. So our position is that that's the best use of this land, and we will get there, which would mitigate this parking in the front yard element. When FedEx was built, of course, we had 25% in the front yard, and how the DRB got there would be reflected in their final.
And what about the phasing question here, which is really what this is about? So so that first building, how many parking spaces do you need for that?
We're designing this facility to accommodate 400 employees. We don't have 400 employees today, but we're designing the phase one to accommodate 400 employees. The ultimate build out would be considerably more than that. So we're showing 400, I think actually 419 parking spaces. That might vary one or two when we get to final design. So we're accommodating the exact amount of parking that the building is designed to accommodate. So our traffic engineering study will be based on, our water and sewer allocations will be all based on that amount.
And just to clarify too, the light gray is the actual parking which will be installed in phase one.
Okay.
And the darker gray, both on the eastern edge and the northwest corner, are proposed future parking areas.
So at the beginning, you mentioned that the current facility is 36,000 square feet.
That's their existing building, yeah.
Facility, and this facility is 4 times larger. Is it fair to say you have around 100 employees today?
Thank you. We currently have well over 100 employees, and we don't have enough parking. We have about 100 parking spots in our current lot, and we don't have enough parking there, and we're overflowing into the drive, into the street.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands this parking reserve for future use standard. This isn't to not permit the parking. This is to pre-approve parking that comes online as you need it, and not separate from the orange and the pink phases. It's to say you build the first 2 bays, and then without coming back with just sending a letter to Delilah that says, "Hey, I'm going to build the third bay now." You can do that sometime within the next 10 years if you feel that you don't need it all at once. So if you have 150 employees, maybe building 250 parking spaces is all you need, and then a little letter in 5 years saying we're going to build the rest.
And that's great with the city, but we do have to deal with other parties, stormwater, all those kinds of things, Act 250 potentially, those kinds of things. So the problem is that those regulations also change over time, so it makes it really hard to plan for. So it is just simpler and more straightforward to go and build the whole thing all at once. I promise you that we will use these eventually, and then some. We probably will run into the situation that we won't have enough parking on this site in a future build out, and we'll need busing and those kinds of things as well. So that's
this is a very wonderful problem to have. Yeah. A company of the quality of OnLogic adding people and filling up parking spaces. We recognize the concerns. No one wants more impervious surface than they need. We don't want it. No one does. It doesn't serve anybody's purpose. We need it. So this is a request that we're making because we need it. When you evaluate deferring something that you might not need day one, the question you're always dealing with is, when will I need it? If you need it inside of 3 years, you got to build it now. If you need it out 10 years, you might kick it down the road. But the cost of mobilizing, demobilizing, mobilizing again, even if the cost of construction doesn't change, you're adding a burden to the cost of that you shouldn't bear if you're going to build it relatively soon thereafter. We're not going to occupy this building for 2 years. We got to get through the permitting process, and then it's a year and 4 months to build. So we're going to be occupying this in probably early, whatever that math is.
2023.
Yeah. And so by that time, and then with a little bit of growth, we're going to consume this parking.
Marla, is that your concerns addressed?
Sure.
Okay. Board members, any more discussion on this item, number 4?
I agree, it's hard to make the call about what's going to happen prospectively. I understand cost is an issue. South Burlington is under a lot of pressure about parking, has been for a while. It's been an angry subject of discussion. Have you considered structured parking? I mean, you have elevated ground here. Have you considered subsurface parking at all as an option?
No. Subsurface parking would triple the cost of our parking. And we are so far under our lot coverage, our allowable lot coverage, that it would not occur to us to have either structured parking above ground. You probably recall what the hospital went through when they put, their parking garage in, which is, subterranean parking. It's just extraordinarily expensive. It's actually more expensive to go down than up.
It costs.
Well, I was thinking about down, not up.
Yeah, down is actually more than up.
Yeah.
The way I understand it, it costs about the cost of a car per parking spot to put it on the ground. In other words, something like $40,000 per parking spot.
35 to 40,000. Yeah.
It's just not a.
It's an extraordinary delta.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't grow, well, all right. It's a lot of asphalt. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, it's a lot of asphalt, it's a lot of building, and it's a lot of employment that comes with that.
And they will have stormwater standards to comply with.
We have to comply with all of it.
Okay, moving along here. The lot is located within the mixed industrial, commercial, or industrial open space zoning district, and is clear that the circulation of the layout cannot reasonably be designed in a manner to avoid conflicts between visitors and employees and the inherent operations of the uses and loss. Staff recommends the board as the applicant to substantiate their claim that the use of the lot cannot accommodate all parking to the sides and rear of the buildings. At this time, based upon staff understanding of the nature of business, it does not seem there would be conflict. So as far as uses of visitors, employees, but can you address the sides and the rear of the building issue?
Yep. So let's go back to the site plan if we can. And this is what I was aimed at a little bit earlier, that when this project is finally built out, we won't have any parking in the front yard. We'll have our building up proud to Community Drive, and therefore everything will be behind it. So we're planning for the future. In the interim, we do have less than 25% in the front yard. I would also suggest that parking, which will be beautifully landscaped, as I think all of our work is, sits above Community Drive, and you will have a very challenging time seeing it. I presume the principal objection to parking in the front yard is an aesthetic one. It's a visual one. And we've taken a lot of pain to make sure that we've addressed those concerns. So I think the argument here between precedent set with our neighbor, which I think everybody would suggest is a very nicely done site plan, and our own internal needs and our future growth, that this is a well thought through site plan.
Comment, Marla?
Just a slightly unrelated, tangential thing. I noticed the faint landscape, the trees along the side, are they existing trees or
Yes,
something?
those are on the FedEx property.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
we show them there, but they're not our trees.
Okay.
And incidentally, we're also showing a potential future connection, which was part of the FedEx approval requirement that we set aside an easement in case neighbors ever wanted to share parking. And we're willing to have that same easement in reverse.
Marla, can you, is it required that they accommodate all parking to the sides and rear of the building?
So the standard in the LDR is that parking be to the sides and rear. There are some exceptions available. One of the exceptions is for a lot in the mixed IC or in the IO. When it is clear that the circulation and the layout cannot reasonably be designed in a manner to avoid conflicts between visitors and employees and the inherent operations of the use on the lot. So this exception is only available in the case of, say, remember we had, oh, you don't remember because you weren't on the board. We had a shipping company and they had all of their shipping trucks doing all their ins and outs and loading docks in the back, and they had the parking, you know, they actually met the standard. They had parking to the side, but they didn't want it commingling. They didn't want the people who were arriving in passenger vehicles to commingle with the pickup, with the trucks. So that would be an instance where this standard would be appropriate. And the question here is whether there really is a conflict that exists, or if this business consists primarily of passenger vehicles and maybe small box trucks, is there actually no conflict? And so this standard wouldn't be allowed.
So are you allowed 0 in the front yard or 25%? I'm a little uncertain.
You're allowed 25% in the front yard if there is the potential for conflicts between the use of the lot and pedestrians and visitors and employees.
Our position is we definitely have that conflict, which is why we have the driveways and shipping and receiving versus parking arranged the way it is. It's imperative to us to keep those segregated for both safety, but also for aesthetic reasons. When our employees and our visitors, our customers come to our office, we want them to have a wonderful experience coming in there. We don't want it commingled with shipping and receiving.
Well, what would stop you from putting, and there may be perfectly sound reasons, but, you know, what would stop you from putting what is now light gray where the dark gray is, if you see what I mean? In other words, expand the parking to the east now in phase 1.
You have a good point, Frank. The only issue with that is that it creates more impervious surface, or a covered surface, because you end up with more road than you need. So that's the reason why we decided to go this way.
Well, no, if you didn't build the parking out front.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and technically it can be done. The problem is when you're building parking like this, it's more economical, and I know you don't like the economical argument, but we all have to think about that. To build an entire strip, if you're adding, in this case, north-south to that strip, it has an effect on the storm drainage, which is the biggest deal. If you're building portions of that and building more of them, which would be the case if we went to that dark gray and pulled the light gray south, it's just more expensive.
Well, it's probably not, it's probably not a good enough I understand from a developer standpoint, the economic argument is very, very compelling, but it doesn't override what the LDRs say.
We weren't suggesting that. Our suggestion is that we do meet this one exception, which is not commingling passenger traffic, just as Marla suggested this other entity did.
But that's what I was addressing. If you take, until you need it, and that is until you get to the point where you're not in the front yard.
Right, with the LDRs.
You build more expensively in the dark gray. You don't commingle because you picked up your extra, the spaces you need in the dark gray by spending more money. Yeah. And thereby complying with the LDR.
Yep.
And meeting your objection of not commingling.
Right. That's fair enough, for sure. What I was also suggesting, however, is when we do our next phase, we're gonna be there anyway.
But-
So if that parking were ultimately okay, because we build to the north, which we will be doing, then why wouldn't it be okay today?
So,
If it's
so
okay, it's okay. If it's
so-
not, it's not.
Well,
Part of that-
but except it's not there. That's not your proposal. You want it now.
part of that is how this is going to be phased, though. If you do the light gray now, it is very easy to add the parking area to the east, that entire line of parking to the east, without interrupting the daily current traffic flow that's going in and out of this office building. If you do all the parking at the north end of these 3 individual lots, you're going to disrupt the traffic flow as you're putting in that second phase parking tremendously in order to do that.
You're going to have a problem with us, I think, or some of us.
I understand. I know where you're coming from. I'm just saying from trying to install that subsequent phase.
What one of the but one of the members on one of the boards my late wife was chair of said, "Oh, it's a legalism."
Okay, yeah.
This is a legalism.
Yeah, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
We believe we have.
I'm not sure you appreciate it enough.
Well, I'm not saying I agree with it, but I appreciate the argument. It's, it's a legitimate position.
All right, let's, Mark and Jim, any comments on this?
Yeah, I got Dan, can I make a comment on it? So I guess one question I have is, obviously, you guys have given some, a lot of thought to this, because, but again, this is still sketch plan. So, and we haven't seen the architecture of the building. I'm sure whether it's worked out and we just haven't submitted it or it's been certainly thought of, because obviously, I know on Logic's brand, and it's going to be quality. It's going to be a good-looking building. I know Lehman Lanfear's designs, and so I'm not worried about the design and architecture of the building at this point. Where it's sketched, so I'm more looking at like the 30,000-foot look of the project. And I guess one question I have, and this does relate to parking and potential phasing of the parking, is whether is there any way that we could you looked at possibly moving the building a little closer to not Belen Drive, Community Drive, and putting one of the strips of parking that currently runs north-south, making the bay of parking that runs east-west behind the building, 2 bays of parking, so that, you have more of an even spread of parking around the building. You could still, this way also you have less parking that's going to be in the front of the building because you're going to, you can move the building slightly forward. Just wondering if there's any thought on that, because I think that would cut down on the percentage of parking that's in the front of the building. And, so I'll just leave it at that. That's just sort of one of my thoughts on the subject.
This particular drawing doesn't show it, but in our stormwater management plan, in where that green arrow is, will be a stormwater detention basin.
Delilah, can you move to one of the next pages down, either the stormwater or landscape plan?
Well, it says future gravel wetland. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and that's part of our stormwater management plan.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that building couldn't move an inch, a foot, 10 feet, or even maybe 20, 30 feet further north. It's not going to be enough to accommodate 0 parking in the front yard as we currently have it configured.
Right. Yeah, we need to move the building at least 60 feet to allow a little bit of green space between the building and parking and allow a second lane of parking. And that would encroach upon that future development plans to the northwest.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Jim, you got anything on this?
Yeah, I don't have anything extra.
Say again?
Nothing more. No.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just weigh in here. I think you've heard some of the concerns about this. I mean, we know, yes, you plan to build those buildings, but they're not there. They're not there now, and it's going to take a while. So I just, try to take what you've heard the board say and tweak some things if you can to try to get closer to not having as much parking in the front, and all. So when you come back, so let's move on. So we've got this issue of qualifying open space. Parking shall be predominantly screened from the roadway with landscaping features and separated from the roadway. Sidewalks or multi-use path by one or more of the following qualifying open space, as defined in Appendix F, so on and so forth. Space shall be sufficient to create or extend a pleasant pedestrian experience, largely screen parking from the street, provide for additional usable open space in the parcel, et cetera, et cetera. Staff comment, no qualifying open spaces provided. The square footage of 74 parking spaces, approximately 12,000 square feet, requiring an open space of at least 4,200 square feet. The provided plan does not appear to meet the intention of this and related criterion. Provide screening, pleasant experience. Staff recommends the board work with our landscape architecture to design a high quality environment as envisioned by these regulations, and to present it at the next stage of review. Do you have any initial comments? Again, this is for the next stage. So
I was a little unclear on the intention here, so I was hoping Marla could give us a little bit more explanation of what's being looked for.
So this standard that's up on the screen describes what the open space in front of front parking needs to do. It needs to create or extend the pleasant pedestrian experience. It needs to largely screen the parking. It needs to provide usable open space on the parcel. So we're just asking for you to really lean into those objectives in designing the space between the front parking and the street.
Delilah, can we go back to the landscaped site plan? I think as people both drive and walk toward this building, I think it's a lovely experience. You'll be coming from the community drive sidewalk or maybe even potentially the walking path, and you'll walk up a very gracious slope toward the building. What you'll see when we get to the architecture is there's a very engaging entrance. And then on the very south end of the office space, there's a very lovely outside, I'll call it courtyard, where we anticipate people gathering, having lunch, whatever. That's a hard surface area. The area between the building and the street or in front of the parking is a nice space. So I'm not quite sure what we're not meeting.
Well, maybe it's a matter of vision. You've worked with the landscape architect on this plan. You've seen some renderings. The board has not had the advantage of those things. The board has that plan that Delilah just showed on the screen. So, maybe it just needs to be illustrated more clearly.
Mm-hmm. Maybe our illustration could be better, and we'll certainly.
Yeah, and again, this is just sketch. So I think
We'll
the
continue to
direction is
develop it.
take a look at that. Help us answer the question for us, so we can just go.
Next meeting, we'll have not only renderings, but three-dimensional renderings of what it'll feel like approaching the building and what the building, be a much better visual.
Yeah, and
I think we'll find it's gonna be lovely.
and don't just slap a picnic bench next to the stormwater pond, so.
I'm pretty sure we won't.
Okay. All right, board members, I'm gonna move on if you're okay. Okay, item 7, the applicant shall construct a safe paved pedestrian access from the street to the building's main entrance. Comment, it appears a sidewalk from Community Drive along the proposed driveway is envisioned. However, given likely pedestrian circulation there, staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant providing a more direct sidewalk that does not follow the driveway alignment.
I know what that's saying, but I don't quite understand what objective that will serve.
So
I think it's safe pedestrian access.
Yeah, so we have a sidewalk that's along the northwestern edge of the entry drive. We come from the sidewalk along Community Drive at that location because as we've alluded to earlier, there's a berm that goes from this drive all the way over. There's about a 10-foot delta in the height, 8 to 10 feet in change in elevation from Community Drive to the land that this project sits on. So we'd either have to cut through that berm or traverse over it, which is an accessibility issue, really. This provides a pretty direct, it's not direct as it could be as the crow flies, but certainly a nice alignment with the entry drive, and it goes to the entrance from the road.
I like the sidewalk where it is. I'm not quite sure what we gain by putting it somewhere.
And I'll add that it does connect into the recreation path, which circumnavigates the site as well, and connects with FedEx as well.
Thanks. Marla, you have any comment on that?
This is not staff applicant conversation. This is staff suggesting
I just
things
wanna-
the board might
just-
want to look at, and if they're comfortable with it, then you're comfortable with it. That's fine.
Okay,
You know,
no, I just want to be sure we didn't miss something. Or
You know, I
or if
think
you
about the
misunderstood.
principles of, pedestrian accommodation design, which is that, sometimes you don't even put the paths in until you see where people walk. And I know that I walk places and I tend to not want to go all the way out to come all the way back in again. So that's where this comment came from. But if the board feels that's good the way it is, then that's the board's decision.
No, that's helpful. No, I just wanted to understand how the comment was generated. So that's good. That's good to know. So, all right. Thank you. Jim, Mark, any thoughts?
No, I think that I hear what Marla's saying, but I also do hear what John is saying in regards to the topography of this site. I think that the public pedestrian access to the site, if you were to put a more direct, line or access from, say, midpoint between the two curb cuts directly up into towards the building, it'd kind of be like walking up a set of stairs with no idea where you're going to, because the building is set far back and at a higher elevation. I think that in this circumstance, the sidewalk following the main visitor and employee entrance driveway does make sense.
Yeah, and I might add something from the northwest corner of the Phase 1 building that's incorporated into the landscaping, and the employees walk out and they want to go sit in the attractive landscaped area next to the, in the front, or where other, if you're coming from the northeast corner of the property, it's pretty obvious you'd sort of walk up right along the driveway. If you're coming from anywhere else, you'd sort of like, how do I get up to the shining city on the hill? So, okay. So, all right. Thank you. And thank you, Marla, for that explanation. Modification of standards at the bottom of page 7 on the staff reports. Solar parking canopies. Staff discussed with the applicant the possibility of authorizing / approving the installation of solar canopies over parking areas. In order to approve this, a modification of landscaping requirements within parking lots would be needed. This section authorizes the board to modify its site plan standards where it finds that the limitations of a site may cause unusual hardship in complying with the standards. In consideration of the City Council's adoption of a resolution in support of the state's aggressive climate action targets (parentheses, the Climate Action Plan), staff recommends the board discuss this with the applicant and consider application of this standard. You want to talk a little bit more about solar parking canopies and how many and the whole thing? Or?
Sure.
We'd love to.
We are all in favor of solar. Go on. You want to go?
We are proposing a rooftop array, which will be probably in the range of 500,000 kilowatt hours. That'll be faceplate. It'll probably produce a little more than that. So we're highly committed to generating that amount of electricity. Probably won't produce all of the electricity we'll consume, but it'll produce a vast majority of it. Solar canopies in parking lots in this climate are very, very challenging. Not suggesting some people don't do it, but it's not very common for a number of reasons. Snow removal being one of them. It's just very, very difficult. The stanchions clearly have to be in the islands, and there's that sort of inhibits landscaping being in those islands because you have a canopy there. So you'll see them more typically in hotter climates where shade is really an imperative. It's less of an imperative here than it would be, say, in Florida, where actually you do see them somewhat regularly. They don't have snow removal issues, and they do have a desire for shade. So I think we're addressing the climate change element with our rooftop solar arrays, and we vastly prefer them there than in our parking lots.
Jim, Mark?
No, I hear what you're saying, and it'd be nice to investigate it, but I do hear the logistical issues. So.
Frank?
I don't have an opinion at the moment. I think it's, I hear both sides of the argument,
Okay,
and I'm undecided.
thanks. To any members of the, thanks, guys, for the information there. We walked through the staff comments. Thank you, Marla, for all this hard work on this application as well as the others. Are there any members of the public here who wish to provide some comment? Okay, in the room or online?
Online.
Okay, and who's online that you turn your camera on and turn your microphone on? Noah, go, yep, there you go. Mic's on. All right, there you go, Noah, you're live. Whoa, where'd you go? No. All right, go ahead, Noah.
His mic is on. We can't hear you.
Oh, we can't hear you, Noah. Shoot.
Sometimes it just needs to be if you just turn your mic off and back on again, it does seem to come back. I know that sounds terrible, but.
Shoot.
No, why
Can
don't
you
you
type your question?
Can you hear us?
Did he put questions in the chat or comment in the chat or?
He had some questions in the chat, so if you want to open the chat, or you don't have a computer. Okay.
No.
Can you open the chat? Who's running?
I've got the chat open. Noah,
Why don't you
are there
just read it
any
out loud, Delilah?
additional questions besides what you typed in the chat? Okay, he had a couple of questions. Will any hazardous materials or substances be stored or used at this facility? Is one.
Go ahead.
I can answer that. No, we are only doing assembly work at this facility, so there's literally no dangerous goods or anything dirty or whatever.
Okay. His other question that he typed in is there any chance for a negative effect on the local environment? This spot is currently a beautiful grassland that is home to many forms of wildlife.
Yeah, we don't anticipate any negative effects on environment or agriculture areas around.
Does your, it's presumably the Act 250 application addresses any presence of endangered or threatened species, and as well as just a general wildlife description or bird habitat, things like that, right?
That will all be addressed as part of Act 250.
Well, it's already been addressed. When we got
Yeah.
the business park approved, those criterion of the Act 250 permit, which we received, addressed all that.
Okay.
So we're approved building lots. I mean,
Okay, no, that helps, it's just to provide the context, because I assumed as much. Go ahead.
I think this is a statement from Noah, and I think it's a question to the board. The Netherlands requires 15% renewable energy. Will we do the same?
We don't have the jurisdiction to do the same. We don't have a mandate to do the same.
We are proposing a 0.5 megawatt of solar on the roof. I don't know what percentage of the actual demand that will provide, but it's significant.
Right.
I think we're in just to be clear in answer to the question, I don't think that that's within our scope of authority.
Right, we don't have we don't have a performance standard in our regs that says X percentage of a building's energy use must be renewable, correct?
We're in an exhortatory posture.
Okay, and now he says thank
We
you
exhort.
for relaying my questions, so I think that was everything.
Okay, Thank you, Noah. Those are good questions, and all questions are good at this, especially here at the early stage of the process, so that any concerns can be identified. So, okay, we can get a motion to either continue the meeting or conclude the meeting.
We do not take any motions at sketch because it is
Okay.
non-binding. So
Okay.
if the board doesn't have any further questions, you can say something along the lines of, "We'll see you at the next stage of review."
Okay. So she said it better than I. She does. She says most anything's better than I. So, all right.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Some other business.
Other business members and other business staff.
We'll be interviewing, City Council will be interviewing a potential DRB members at the October 18th City Council meeting to replace Alyssa.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The City Council will be interviewing new DRB members.
Oh, new DRB.
Yeah, sorry, yes, new.
How many applicants were there?
Don't know yet. The application period is still open.
Gotcha.
We have received some applications.
Great. Sounds good. Any other business?
Are we short members?
Alyssa is resigning because she's moving out of town.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a real bummer.
That's right. Okay. Hearing, Mark, Jim, you got anything?
Nope.
Okay, all right. Hearing no other business, I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second. I'm gonna second that motion to adjourn. All right, thanks, everybody, and thanks for your patience.
This
with me,
conference is
Marla.
no longer being recorded.
For your help.
We get to a vote?
Hey, good night, everybody.
All right, motion's approved to adjourn.